Hello, this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima testing on stream, and when we get to the countdown figure of 10 seconds I'll key up 147,475 in Melbourne, 2 meters for the simultaneous audio with this video. Hello, this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, as usual with the Saturday night live stream, which you can find by googling VK3AML 29 October 2022. That is there for those on 2 metres who are listening on 147.475. There's a simultaneous YouTube live stream of this, which will include a lot of video shot on site in New Zealand. By googling VK3AML 29 October 2022, you should be able to find. Tonight's subject: radio and science in New Zealand's furthest south, specifically Invercargill. Invercargill, a city with a population currently of 57,000. It's roughly the same size as Shepparton here in Victoria, but because it's so isolated and so far south, more than 5 degrees south, I think, of Hobart, or 400 kilometres, as you'll see, it has to be more self-sufficient as a locality. Let's have a look at where Invercargill is relatively. There's southern Australia. Invercargill's the red circle on the right. Let's draw a line of latitude there, and you can see that Invercargill, in terms of latitude, is a long way south of Hobart. In fact, it's rather more than 400 kilometres south of Hobart, and you can imagine it's almost intercepting subantarctic weather patterns. Now, the little that I knew about Invercargill until I actually went there in 2019 with Mike VK7MJ could be possibly summed up in this old 1958 documentary, Portrait of Southland, which we're showing courtesy of Archives New Zealand.
But in Invercargill, capital of Southland, time has made a world of difference. Named after Captain Cargill, leader of the Otago settlers, the town was founded in 1856.
And as you're about to see, New Zealand, Invercargill included, has a national religion, and it's called rugby. It's hard to conceive, if you've been brought up on Australian rules football, the amount of passion that the New Zealanders put into this game, but this is characteristic.
Merely onlookers. On the sidelines today, they'll be active tomorrow.
And this is us coming into Invercargill in 2019, the road in from the Catlins. Heading east, and we stayed at Colonial Ontay, medium-priced motel, and then on a Saturday evening we made our first foray into the streets of Invercargill just to see what it was like.
In Invercargill, and it's a very much more cosmopolitan place than I thought it would be. Lots of large buildings.
Reminds me of Launceston, actually.
Yeah. Obviously a fairly important industrial centre. Main streets of Invercargill.
And we had it at an exceptional time of the year, midsummer. Temperature was about 16 degrees. And just on the left there, beyond where Mike is actually doing his filming, is the Hallensteins building, which has a particularly interesting facility in it, looking up D Street. D Street, Invercargill. There were tramways there once upon a time, commemorated on this foundation stone. The block on the right has actually been entirely cleared since we were there. They're rebuilding blocks to suit modern earthquake regulations. Now there's Hallenstein's building, and on the upper floors of that is Australia's southernmost community radio station, Southland Radio, and we're about to see a little bit about that. If any place in Australia has the character of a place, it's communication centres, it's newspapers, it's radio. So here is a portrait of Radio Southland.
At Radio Southland, we're the voice of your community. If you've ever wanted to put your own show together, we can make it happen. So, if you're part of a group in Southland that has something to tell everyone else, do it through us, live from our modern on-air studio, or from the comfort of our production studio.
We're here to make it easy,
fun,
and informative. Radio Southland, 96.4 FM, and online at radiosouthland.org.nz.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Darren Ludlow, toku ingoa. I'm the station manager here at Radio Southland, so we're here to take you on a backstage tour. Come on in, haere mai. This is where we make magic radio happen. We put the voices of Southlanders on air 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So let's have a look behind the scenes. Welcome to our reception area, and in here a lovely comfortable lounge where we quite often lounge. This is a room where our program makers get to get themselves ready, prepare, spend a bit of time chatting with their guests, and of course drink a lot of free tea and coffee or warm up their food in the microwave. We're really going behind the scenes. Come round here. This is where Rach Bailey, our station coordinator, works. Everyone's got a little workspace. It's truly chaotic, and if you don't believe me, come here. Yes, the holder of the camera, the filmer of this little video, Hawhiala, has a very tidy office. It's quite shameful, but come in here and have a look at something. Let me show you something. Come around here. True confessions time. Not so tidy if you come around this side, but when Rafa was tidying up her office in the first instance, she piled everything up here and the shelf fell down. Thanks to Tom, who's a jib stopper, it's all fixed. Not only are you getting a behind the scenes tour, but you're getting the true lowdown. I'm not going to leave myself out of this. So let's have a look at my office, which, to be perfectly honest, isn't the tidiest space, but it is full of a lot of toys and movie memorabilia and stuff about Star Trek and Star Wars and photos of my family and artworks that my children have produced. It's a space where I feel really comfortable. I've been working in here for 13 years now, and some days it really smells like it. Let's have a look at a place that nobody gets to see. This is what we call our rack room. And basically, this is the equipment that drives Radio Southland. That's all you can see. It's secret. No one else is allowed to see that, and if the Russians get hold of it, we're all doomed. Elements Photography donated a couple of photos to us a couple of years ago of some great Southland entertainers, Lockie Hayes and Sam Cullen. Thanks very much to Elements Photography for that. This is our production recording booth. And so a lot of people who record their shows and don't go live on air, they do it in here. We've got two types of microphones. There's this one, which is a plate microphone that sits on the table, and it basically means if you're sitting in a chair being interviewed by somebody that you forget that you're on the radio because you're not looking at the microphone. If you're like me and you're a bit old school, you like these things. Something you can stand up and project into. This is a microphone that's probably one of our nicer ones, but if you really want to know about microphones, come with me. What we have on station is somebody who needs an intervention. They are a microphone addict, and that is our production engineer, Tom Tuteone, who has so many microphones in his studio in Bluff that I think they're forming their own country. So we had a look in the production studio. This is where everything is recorded and mixed. We've got a lot of technical equipment in here to make it look quite complicated because basically It is. Tom's just graduated with a degree in audio production, which took how long?
3.5 years.
And that was on his first attempt, so not bad. By the way, not that he would skite about it, but top student. Here's a room that, again, it's another little storeroom with things like old records and compact discs, none of which gets used anymore. Look at this. These are compact discs that go right back to the station's origins in 1992. There were a lot of old LPs as well, but somebody got rid of the turntables. That was before I got here. Now, of course, turntables are fashionable again, and maybe we should look at getting some back. We'll worry about that next year. Here's another place where the magic happens. This is our on-air studio, and it looks tremendously complicated because that's how middle-aged men like me like it. The desk is, as you would find on a lot of commercial radio stations, and there's a whole lot of screens everywhere, but each screen has a different purpose, and really, people who are coming in and making live radio are only using these two, which are connected. So all you're doing is clicking play and turning the microphone off. And then when the song finishes, turn the microphone on, talk. When you finish talking, click play, turn the microphone off. That's how easy radio is. And that's behind the scenes at Radio Southland. So, if you're interested, why don't you come and have a go?
And this is Australasia's southernmost community radio station, Radio Southland. I thought it was worth investigating this, as the community radio stations these days really capture the feeling of a place. And thus it is with this. This is as far south as you can go in the world with community radio, particularly in the Australasian world.
So this is the studio at Radio Southland, and for some people, making radio can be a little daunting. They might think, I don't know how to use that. Well, it's really easy. We can train you, or we can have people to operate the equipment for you. What we want is to hear what you have to say. You're interesting, you're different, your organisations that you're involved with, your children, your life, your nationality, your religious perspective, whatever it is that makes you, we want to hear about it. So make radio with us. Radio Southland, 96.4 FM.
An entirely profit-free organisation, I might add.
We're on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Radio Southland is telling our story on social media. Backstage, schedules, videos. This is radio with pictures. Follow us. Leave your like, your comment, your opinion. What you have to say is important to us. Radio Southland is by the people, for the people, about the people.
And you can listen to Radio Southland via internet, which I frequently do. Just to give you some idea of the geography here, this is a map of the southern end of New Zealand. Invercargill, of course, the largest city, 57,000. South of that, on the Awarua Plain, they have the Awarua Radio Museum, which we'll see very shortly being opened and then take a tour of it. They also have a satellite ground station at Awarua and an over-the-horizon radar, which is designed for auroral investigations. It points south, and it's a companion radar to one on South Bruny Island in Tasmania. Let's go to Awarua, south of Invercargill. And I went there with Mike 7MJ in 2019. There's Awarua Radio on the map. The mountains just to the right of the road, Mount Anglem, which is the highest mountain on Stewart Island. And this is supposed to be a sunny day in Invercargill. So much for sun.
Not this sunny.
Just. And where you find this bus shelter on the right of the road to Bluff from Invercargill, south of Invercargill, this is where the turn-off for Awarua Radio ZLB and the Awarua Radio Museum is. Turn onto that dirt road on the left. ZLB in Invercargill, or rather in Awarua, south of Invercargill, is the equivalent of Melbourne's old VIM ship-to-shore radio telegraph service, originally radio telegraph. And at about the same time, in 1913, ZLB went to air with Telefunken spark equipment. So let's go and have a look at the Awarua Radio Museum, one of the best museums I've struck anywhere in Australia.
Yep.
The entry drive goes past the original German-style cottages that were designed for the Telefunken engineers who installed the station in 1913. In a moment you'll see those cottages on the right. There they are, built in the German style. The engineers had to escape from New Zealand just as the First World War started, actually. Bit of an embarrassment having a German system for your main communications, but that's the way it went. And that is the Awarua Radio Museum. Established in 2016, we're about to see the opening ceremony as recorded by Rex Johnson, a videographer. So let's go back to January 2016 and see this opened. And this clip by courtesy of Rex Johnson. If you want to see the video that goes with this, please Google VK3AML 29 October 2022. That's Google the YouTube live stream VK3AML 29 October 2022.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Your Worship the Mayor, our invited guests and others. Thank you very much for coming and sharing celebration with us today. We're extremely proud of what's been produced, and you can see the quality of it all, and it makes us extremely happy. It will serve as a educational centre for many years to come, and your children, grandchildren and their grandchildren in time will enjoy this, I'm sure. There are one or two people that I'd like to thank, and I won't go on because there are hundreds of people that need thanking. I'm going to use the word all, so that I don't miss anybody out. But we do particularly thank the funders and the builders, the plumbers and electricians and suppliers and the volunteers and the members, all for their effort. In particular, I want to thank 4 of our members. The first member I would like to thank is Mr. Jim Andrews, a retired builder. Jim was one of the innovators of this scheme and has put in many, many hours of voluntary work. Another person who's worked long and hard is Mr. Clifford Sheriffs. He's our treasurer. He looked after the finances. He's done a tremendous amount of research work. And all the little labels that you see right throughout the museum today have been composed by him and manufactured and installed by him. The other person that I would mention is Mr. Ian Donaldson from Teamwork South. Ian came to us after having completed Tehipoi Museum at Riverton and brought a wealth of information to us. We were very lucky with that. All the do's and the don'ts, and there were plenty of them. So, and Ian was also our facilitator on the project team and kept a record of all the goings on right throughout. And the next fellow, he's been around for a while. He came here at the ripe old age of 16, and he's still going strong. And that's Mr. Brendan Sparks, our patron. And he too has put in many, many hours of voluntary work. I'll now call on the Mayor to say a few words.
Invercargill's Mayor, Tim Shadbolt.
Thank you.
Well, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's certainly a pleasure and a privilege to be opening this museum. We have had a lot of problems in recent times over museums and art galleries because as a result of the Christchurch earthquake, and it's been a very difficult time for us. But maybe this is a good example of an alternative type of development and having specialist museums set up looking at one aspect of our history and heritage. And this of course has got a rich heritage in terms of the pressures of war often stimulate technological developments, and this here has been no exception. I remember my first visit with the city manager, and he was telling me about the Battle of Minsk, I think it was, on the Russian front, and they couldn't get messages through from the British Admiralty to their warships, but they could get messages through to here, and we could then send those messages on to the peak of this battle. And communications is such a vital process in that those kind of emergencies and crises. From the charge of the Light Brigade onward, it's been a major issue. So this is going to, I think, be great for the educational facilities. Our council looked at it and made a substantial grant to it, and now we're looking at the ongoing costs and perhaps a regional contribution to this, and I'm sure anyone from outside the region will be impressed by this tremendous work that's been done. And it's, as I said, a great pleasure to be opening it. It's going to be the educational purposes and are just going to really benefit Southland and Invercargill and the visitors who come to look at it from outside the city. So without further ado, hereby declare this Communications Museum open.
I'd like to call upon Mr. John Jones and Mrs. Mary Osborne to come forward. John will say a few words and then we'll ask them to cut the cake.
Just a moment. Just before we cut the cake, I'd like to present a small gift to appreciation of our museum. Thank you. Stand together, white and blue.
Okay.
Around this side, yes.
The two elderly people here were associates of the station in the 1940s.
How do we do this?
Just any way you like.
Cutting the cake with a photograph of the original operators.
For any of you who don't know, well, quite a few of you won't actually, John has come all the way down from Te Awamutu to be with us today. He was an operator here in about 1944, John?
No, 44 years.
Yes, and Murray and her husband Henry Osborne, you lived down here, and Henry worked down here from when, Murray?
From about 45, 1945, yes.
So we thought it was appropriate for them to cut our cake for us. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Paula, Your Worship. I'd just like to say very few words. I live a long way up at Te Awamutu, but I have been in contact with the committee for a number of years, and in today's language there's a word which is quite often used, and that word is amazing. And I'm going to now say that this is quite amazing, and I offer you my total congratulations on what has been done. Thank you.
As mentioned, I'm the patron. Originally I thought of this idea many years ago to form a group interested in the history of Southland's communication, and as things progressed we were able to achieve this with a lot of volunteers, and it's important to try and preserve the history of communications because one is it gives an opportunity for younger people to start talking to their grandparents about where things have come from to now, and also looking forward to where we might be heading into the future and the possible educational opportunities that could come about from all that sort of thing.
And here starts our tour of the station. That's one of the old operating buildings, now a private residence.
Yeah, small one. They're kind of lucky, they've got a nice descriptor there as to what's what, but it's a 24
And Mike Bailey, the secretary of the station, showed myself and 7MJ around. This is some of the original equipment. Preserved beautifully, I might add. The only thing that I find unrealistic about this is I don't think that those radios in operation were ever quite so clean. It's impressive. Early Morse keys of various types, paddle and key. Date stamps, output tubes. There's a modern PLL receiver at the back there. Electric clock used for keeping accurate time. And everywhere on the walls there were instructional panels, very, very nicely done. This is one of the best communications museums of its type I've seen anywhere in Australasia. Output tubes, water-cooled. Collier and Beale transceiver made in New Zealand, and its output tubes, the R880A, with key. The museum has its own amateur radio station here, FRG7, as you see, an ATU on the top shelf.
Absolutely no problem, transmit's just disabled.
Right, okay.
This gear here all works perfectly fine, no problems.
So it's hooked up to an antenna and actually...
The problem is well, we've got the unit there to switch,
yeah,
but our antenna sadly broke down a while ago, and we're looking at...
the antenna was down at the time we visited because of the very high winds they get here. You can imagine at 47 degrees south and sticking out into the Southern Ocean, the winds are quite terrific.
Any idea what the
Old Morse sounders, 19th century.
tape recorder is?
Yeah, we do. This unit here is simply so when you've got...
And that's Mike Bailey, ZL4OM.
You can listen to one.
Yeah.
Nice and simple. The key is actually there's another key like it down the far end.
Yep.
Simply once again so you can do two different circuits at the same time, because they would have had circuits from here back to Invercargill, potentially to the War Office in Wellington back in
multiplex telegraphy.
They could sort of send things out in one go.
Okay.
And the tape was simply to I'm not sure on the provenance of that exactly, but it's just a receiver.
Right, it would have been for line telegraph, I suppose.
The old sounder, yeah. They work out very quickly. You can
a Creed teleprinter.
You had 15 around you and you could just spin to the right one that was going on. You could identify that one.
An original 1920s mechanical teleprinter.
They were known for a number of things apart from teleprinters. They used to make accessories for gramophones and all sorts of things.
Well, that's further around.
Well, the mechanics of the decoders, you see some of the old original
reeds with a spinning disc going round.
Can you imagine the noise of that operating?
There's your disc.
Oh, the decoders were incredible things to see running and adjusting them, I believe, was a real art.
Getting into the telephone area here.
Have there ever been any amateurs on Stewart Island?
Yes.
None now?
I don't know if there's any living over there, but I do know that there was someone over there recently. They've got some masts set up, tucked away under a friend's holiday home, and when they are over there, they do pull them out and put them up.
They have a working telegraph there too, so you can send and receive test messages.
The work was primarily done, all of the text that was done here in town. I can't tell you who did it, whether it was someone here at the museum or not. Sadly, that's before my time.
Yeah.
But the actual imagery was all put together and printed over in wall by someone who does this professionally.
Okay.
But however, there's little things like they had the American Morse. So we've had to stick over that.
Yeah.
Small little glitch.
Yeah.
The American line code actually used about 3 different lengths of characters.
A very impressive collection of telephones going back 20 years into the 19th century.
How to say SOS, NV, and
Ericsson's. Bell Blake up the top, very old.
Because we used to have a big non-directional beacon for work, for the airport at work. And you pick up the phone line and all you hear is NV.
A magneto-type telephone exchange.
Oh, that's right, CQ, of course.
What exactly is this piece of apparatus?
That's a chronograph. So that was used for timing toll calls.
Okay.
So you'd put in your bit of paper in here, and there's some of those examples over there. You'd crank down the one handle to start it, and when the toll call ended, because you might be monitoring a few of them at once, you put the paper back in.
Timing the phone
put them in.
calls,
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first job usually of an apprentice engineer at an
There's
exchange,
Mike VK3AML.
the first job ever would generally be go around and fill up the ink wells.
Okay.
Of those.
Lightning arresters of various types.
And that's the thing.
They weren't very good lines either, some of them.
And playing, as you might gather from several video screens, were interviews with people who had been involved with ZLB, this station going right back.
Even with the touch tone phones, they dial the number and then pick up the handset.
Calculograph were used by telephone operators to record the times of calls and charge accordingly. Various types of telephone line insulator, covering a period of perhaps 150 years.
So you understand the 111 here then? Well, yeah, it was like the old...
And the cables that were used for line telegraphy and undersea work. Some telephone, some telegraph. A fibre optic cable in blue at the bottom. Working telephone, if you want to try a magnetophone, there you go.
I was going to say it's not the obvious. Yeah, no, someone recently broke in there. They think it might have been one of the team talk or chorus folks.
Moving through into that section, that's the domestic radio receiver section, and there's some very high-class radios from the 20s and early 30s there.
The 104 speaker.
The one on the left is a speaker.
20.
TRF days. This particular machine is really intriguing.
Very early, I think about 1932, radio gramophone.
And it records as well as it plays back.
See the logo in the lid.
There's a Shaw microphone down there.
Shaw D104 mic sitting down there. Set piece representing the 1940s.
An Echo British radio, SW56.
Yes, and then they're still at the exchange on Groth.
Loudspeakers and radios, starting with the 1920s at the top.
Spherovox speaker, a Geckophone horn, Neufeld and Kuhnke speaker, and an SG Brown Type Q of about 1924-5.
Very nice collection of vintage radios.
Nice collection of domestic earlier receivers.
There's a Grebe synchrophase on the right.
And this Gilfillan, I think, was made in Sydney, unless I'm mistaken. Or it could be California, I'm not sure.
An Atwater Kent.
L chassis minus its original case.
Philips speaker in the middle there. We saw them being produced last week in a film, as you might recall.
Mike 7MJ is talking to Mike Bailey.
I was going to say, if you were in Quest in the CBD, if you know where that is, that's the front half of the old exchange.
Oh, okay.
Century building. But no, I had a friend in Wellington say, he was wondering why his ADSL was there one day, and they were doing a repair in
the old Invercargill telephone exchange, 1959.
I still get length. If I can find a length of that, I'll take the contact.
But he was finding that, for those old cables, they kept repairing on them the way they used to, except they put a bit of solder on them.
Have a go at Morse.
Originally doing them, they just twisted them together and then taped them up, or put the paper on. But now, of course, at least they put a bit of solder as well. But fibre, of course, is going to be and replacing everything.
It's all set up to work.
Yes.
Oh, gap's terrible.
Gap, yeah.
Oh, yeah, but it's if you have it set too close together, the kids don't get any idea of the feel.
They don't get it.
No, they don't get it.
The gap of about a quarter of an inch.
The Bluff Industrial Line.
And we were really surprised to see a film collection of this size,
because a lot of those
along with a theaterette, which you'll see in a minute.
Right. I recognise the ampli, and I used to have one minus the wooden petals.
Days of Bakelite, days of wood.
So, are you interested in collecting more?
The problem is a process of hiring one of the garages that's just been. But the idea is we'll use
a
one
New
of those.
Zealand-made portable.
Sure.
Now this is something. It's a recording machine as well as a playback.
If you like, I can get my cell phone out as a light.
You can actually switch the speaker to run the cartridge.
The original location where Awarua Radio was set up is.
It looks like Invercargill Telephone Exchange was switching a fairly large area.
Well, you've got to remember, in terms of a large area, for our MP, Member of Parliament for Invercargill, for Clutha Southland, it's the largest electorate.
Right.
So
it
country.
had punch.
So you can sort of see why there were two buildings for the exchange. Actually, technically three.
Gosh.
The radio guys had the building behind as well,
Okay,
which stored all the batteries for the exchange.
This is a working sounder.
And we are putting in a step-by-step PABX here as well, which is going to go actually. So the only thing that doesn't work on that board is the night alarm. That's the only thing that doesn't work.
And you can see in the back on this side.
Imagine wiring this.
I like the mechanical timer.
Quite a bit of looming going on there.
Yes.
More lightning arrestors.
Lines were there were enough lines in town that you could walk from the Exchange to Space Street without touching the rim.
It was hard to know where to start with this collection, actually. It was so comprehensive and so very nicely displayed.
One of our technical officers ended up going down on, back in, it was 74 or something, on the Acheron, and hit a roadway on the way back, and the Russians had to rescue.
And as I mentioned with other apparatus here, the only thing that makes it look unoriginal is that it is so clean in this museum.
It's not a good time having that happen. And you're going, please don't throw out the old one.
It's completely impractical, but fascinating to watch.
I don't believe there's any impact.
Yeah, no. It was the big thing of synchronise. Basically, had to synchronise.
We are at a point of actually having your glass re-glued, starting to come wide.
Insulators, Pyrex glass. Those are as used at Awarua with the Telefunken mast 1913.
Yeah, no, a lot of them used to have basically
Feed-through insulator from Awarua 1913.
the sharp thing would drop, so it was actually running past.
And a green ceramic strain insulator attached to a piece of steel from the original 1913 lattice mast.
Oh, that's right. That little magnet on the bottom.
Back in the days of spark telegraphy.
Used to have a slate magnet underneath, so if it was running.
Oh, you see the change.
Telefunken guy wire shackle from Awarua.
Rubber. And the number of receivers and transmitters here on display, including a national HRO,
there.
Yes, but a lot of places
takes the breath away. It's like every disposal store I've ever seen.
RCA transmitter.
don't recognise that one.
Guy turned up here and said, oh, I remember that radio.
From 1942.
I sold it to the guy who donated it here.
And if I come out from that transmitter,
I don't know, I believe they were.
A logging recorder.
This one definitely is, but I'm sure you.
there's the other side of it.
Picks up
Looks a bit like Dave 3ASE's transmitters.
80s.
Mid-80s, yeah.
So that's working. There's another one over there, but there's also
Blowers at the bottom.
on that one over there, so that they can have a channel
An
system.
Antistone 880 or a... No, 770R. Okay.
770.
They had a whole range of them. All in the 60s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah, well that
That'd be
particular-
50s vintage.
Yeah, only 22.
Yeah. 2182, that's the distress frequency.
The original mast from 1913. And that's the main radio display space.
Well, they've been gifted to us, they just haven't quite.
Another view of the amateur station.
So that's the
And who
other
runs the radar?
Latrobe.
Okay.
So
The
it's
lightning
twin
bolt
is the
shows
Bruny
where we
Island
are.
radar
Right.
in Tasmania.
I didn't know there was one there. I look over Bruny Island.
Mike lives just across the water from Bruni on the Dondacasto Channel.
So yeah, that one's twin, the of the Tiger radars.
Where it is.
Oh, let me do some good.
Managers of the station starting in December 1913.
University of Tasmania used to have a very
There
good
were quite a
physics
few.
department, in fact,
Oh, they're just taking out. You've had problems with the
The author of the book on Awarua, Alex Glennie, had a father who worked here.
I know there was a whole business like that.
If that's any help, I'd say that's pretty on, because they don't hear. That's it.
RCA AR-77. Just taking a second look at some of these.
Italy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that used to
Date stamps used for telegrams.
Just to go back to the Jet Bruny Island.
A Type 849 radio valve. I wanted to be sure that I captured all of this because it's a long way from Melbourne to Invercargill. I hope to get back there within the next couple of years, but you can imagine in 2019 we were looking at this not realising that we'd be locked down for the next 2 years. 2020, 2021 were almost written off in terms of international travel. So I was lucky to get this while I did. every conceivable type of telephone, telegraph cable used in New Zealand, and full details of where they were laid and how long they lasted. Interviews with people who had been associated with these various pieces of equipment. And you can imagine that in a city that prides itself on its technical education, this becomes a very valuable teaching resource, particularly in electrical engineering, electronics, communications, audio, and broadcasting. We're about to see, in a few minutes, a theatrette that's attached to this facility. There it is, and up the stairs I had the shock of my life, because those are not just 35mm cinema projectors there. They're 35mm projectors with the original Vitaphone sound on disc attachment still on them from the days when they showed the jazz singer. A quick look inside one of the transmitters. This is up around the 2 kilowatt level.
Yeah, the one thing that is forced with us here is that with the new fibre systems going in, of course those require power for light at one end.
All behind Perspex, so you can get a good look at every component.
But what they've done,
An RCA transmitter that you've just been looking at in a long panning shot. A recording telegraph of about 1890 vintage. I wonder if anybody has a business directory where they could look up the makers. Silvertown, London, for example. A Creed relay, high-speed relay. You don't see B batteries for radios much in their original form. There were a few here. And the Creed teleprinter apparently does actually work. Bell Blake magneto telephone of the 1880s. That's actually a Hunnings cone carbon granule transmitter with a carbon diaphragm. Rather ornate Ericsson phones, Swedish designs. And there's the main entrance to Awarua, and zooming in on, I think that was the receiving installation. It's now a private dwelling, so we didn't go there. That's about as close as we could get to it without invading privacy. And there are other buildings on the site, long since unused. I think that was one of the tie-off points for the original masts, which would have been out in that general area. The original spark telegraphy mast, 1913. And after having a week at about 26 degrees Celsius, Invercargill has just gone Antarctic. This is the 14th of February, and just look at this drizzle coming down. This is more what we were expecting of the place.
Finally, the normality of the area.
Yes. Thanks, Mike.
Spell A.
Now, this theatrette is equipped with original Western Electric sound on disc gear from 1929. It's only a little theatrette, but it's painted to look much larger, as you can see.
Honestly, there isn't actually that much to see.
Cleverly disguised. all completely functional and running 35mm.
I can tell you those seats are actually out, I believe, of the...
They've got a Vitaphone disc on the wall here, and if I can get the reflection, you'll see the words Bruce Barnesfeather written on this disc. It's the Bruce Barnesfeather supporting short, the soundtrack of it, that went with the Warner's film The Better Whole, which I think was either 1926 or 7.
It was 1926.
It was only the second or third film with a Vitaphone soundtrack, and this was the only talking that accompanied the film, the supporting short. And there is the disc in bloody Invercargill.
You never can tell where this stuff will end. You can see the name inscribed in the disc, Bruce Barnesfeather. He was the cartoonist who drew Old Bill.
Two projectors here, they're peerless projectors, but the incredible thing is, for the first time I'm seeing projectors that still have the sound on disc attachment attached on the back. Now if you go underneath, you'll notice that there's a gearing system with a shaft there that goes to the back of that motor.
Synchronizing
That's missing. Motor. That's all that's missing from getting the sound on disc system still working. Apart from that, these are original 1929 projectors. Holy crap, it's got its original. There's the Vitaphone fader. Oh my sainted art.
Fades from one
below.
From one projector to the other, and each projector takes 20 minutes of film.
Amplifier racks.
All
and
thermionic,
still works. Sound head.
Film or disc, see?
Western Electric sound head. An original 1929 installation with the ERPA sign still on the side of the spool box.
Optical sound head.
Unbelievable. It's a simplex projector.
Slightly later lamp house.
There's the Vitaphone fader. And the disc attachment. Still on the back.
Missing its pickup. One of the amplifiers, left channel. It's been duplicated for stereo, right channel. Probably duplicated in the 50s. Saturable reactor synchronizing system. 16-inch turntable to take the 16-inch Vitaphone discs, which rotated at 33 1/3 revolutions. But it's very unusual to see them still fitted to a projector like this. Complete set of spares, spare carbons, carbon arcs in this. And there's the fader resistor to take the house lights down slowly. You don't just switch the lights off in a theaterette, you fade them down. So you needed a shunt load for that. The old days when everything was electromechanical. And up on the right, a Western Electric monitor horn. Those are the spool boxes for the 35mm spools. A monitor horn. I've seen individual components from this system before, but I've never seen the whole thing complete and in operation like this. The sound-on-disc system was used for film soundtracks from 1926 to about 1931. I asked the Radio Museum secretary, Mike Bailey, ZL40M, how he became involved with the place.
I'm an amateur radio operator, ZL40M, and basically we went down there actually to do the Jock Field Day.
I'll just stop that there and say that Mike very generously allowed me to interview him by Zoom earlier this week.
And never been there before, and basically got involved slowly that way. There was a few staffing issues, and I turned up with secretarial experience, and that's of course always a bad thing if you don't want to get involved. So that's what happened there. It was just a little bit of a one of those things that happens. But yeah, I got involved. I'm a former librarian, so I'd always had a way of organising things, and when it comes to a museum, they're very, very similar to a library. They're just a library of objects. So a lot of experience transferred, and my wife, of course, Rach, is also involved there now as well. And the rest is history. Yes, now the museum itself is in the new, I suppose you'd call it, transmitting station, which was built in the 70s, I think. And the operating station, it's about 1 kilometre down the road, currently filled with all of our former mayor, as of last week, our former mayor's junk.
Tim Shadbolt.
The way the councils work, it's fun. So yeah, it was originally set up, of course, with operating remotely. You don't want the transmitter necessarily right next to you. So there was a number of transmitting stations. There was at least 2. The later one, of course, as I said, being built in the 70s. That was all filled in. There was a garage and all sorts as a part of it, and that's been built out by the museum using funding to create an environment to display all of the artefacts and the story of Awarua.
Have there been any major additions to the display since we filmed it in 2019?
Not too much. We now have a step-by-step exchange on display and operating. I think the power supply just blew up, so it might not be operating right now. But that was actually a donation from the Ferry Mead up in Christchurch. So we've managed to get that all going, and so we've put perspex on the sides of it so you can watch a cool step through the system. That's really the main change that there has been since then. We are trying to catalogue our objects because, believe it or not, they're not in a great catalogue. Some of our objects are available on Museums Online, which I think is museumsonline.co.nz. No, sorry, nzmuseums.co.nz. And yeah, that's part of what we're just trying to do over time. But yeah, it's really a case of not enough people to actually make sure that things... We're keeping our toes above the water, I suppose, in terms of people to actually look after the place. So, developing new things is quite difficult. We have developed this, but most of our time is spent maintaining what's already there.
I believe you now have a satellite ground station on the Awarua site exploiting its unique southerly position on the Earth's surface.
Well, it actually all started with the European Space Agency, and they sent their ATV to the space station. They were going to send 5 of them, but they had nowhere. They had no tracking stations in the area where I think it was the second stage was going to cut off on the ascent, and then on the next orbit it was going to disconnect from the ATV itself, and on the next orbit the ATV's engines were going to start firing right over this one spot, and it was just out of range of all the tracking that's available in Australia, and of course you haven't quite got to South America to be picked up there. So they wanted a sort of like a car park worth of concrete, park a caravan next to it, put your gear in there and off you go. One of our people down here, Robin, managed to talk them into building an entire site based out of the former Rangiora Telecom dish station. There's all sorts of grounding and foundations down there about 8 metres deep, and this is right on the southern tip of where the
Awarua Radio was. So they built this, the ESA built this whole big thing and then donated it back to Southland. And it's run by Venture Southland as they were. They're now called something else, but they're also now a part of a company called Space Ops NZ. And they basically run the site. You can own your dish, you can have them own the dish, and you just borrow time on it and all sorts. But ultimately, they track these ATV spacecraft. A company from South Africa actually came out. I actually remember one of the guys was ZS2MM. Was his call sign. He was amazed. It was the first site they'd been to where they didn't have to have bribe money and guns. He was absolutely amazed. So they'd bring out all their gear all the time, but now the 5 launches are done. They were looking at other ways they could use the site, and it was actually Peter Beck of Rocket Lab that said, actually, I know Planet Labs are looking for sites to get access from their Flock 1 doves, the satellites. As they go over the poles, because they're a polar craft, they really need to offload their data as much as they can, because they can only do it in the northern hemisphere. So there was nothing really down south, and as they come over the pole, there's actually quite a large area that they can be picked up from, because down here there's absolutely nothing in the way of hills really for miles. I think nothing greater than 3 degrees on the horizon from the site down there. So you've got all that great grounding as well that's naturally there. And yeah, Planet Labs ended up building 2 dishes with big radomes about 8 meters across. And as well as that, there's a number of actual telecommand antennas, which I think are just using sort of, standard sort of Yaesu tracking equipment. And yeah, they do the telecommand and such, and then these dishes do the actual downloads of the high definition files.
And this video was made by Andrew Penney, used with his permission.
Well, Reina Tata, you've come from Invercargill this morning to Awarua, and it is freezing. Southerly storm hitting as we speak. You can see the dark clouds in the background. And this is Robin McNeil, who is the dishmaster here at the Awarua ground station. Robin, tell us about what a ground station is.
Yeah, kia ora. Well, think of us as the phone home link for the satellites and rockets going around the Earth. They've got to get their signals and messages back to Earth so the scientists and end users and Google Earths can get images, and the engineers have to get commands up to the satellites to tell them where to point their cameras and where to get data from. We've got one over here behind us. You can see it, it's a dish. That one's what's called parked. It's not doing anything right at the moment, but that will generally just follow the satellites through the sky as the satellites go over. It takes about 8 minutes for a satellite to go from horizon to horizon. Yeah, that's a ground station.
So fairly sophisticated equipment that you can see around us. What's what we're standing beside here?
The same thing, except it wants to be out of the wind. It's a cheaper way to build the antenna mount itself. Stops it blowing away. There's a huge sail area for these things.
Right, and inside there is some more sophisticated equipment. How about we go inside and have a look?
Oh, it's a bit warmer.
Let's go.
This is VK3AML.
Cool, well it's a bit warmer in here. Robin, what have we got going on in this room?
Right, this is our ground station, and this is where we track satellites. And the equipment we've got here does that. That's our box of tricks that points the antenna at the right place. Here's our computers for storing the information that we get, and also for controlling the whole system. Yeah.
So you can track satellites for all sorts of different countries, but you've actually been involved in a New Zealand project, the rockets that have been launched from our very own country.
That's right, and we're very proud of that. We've tracked a number of rockets for from the really, really biggest ones that exist just about to Peter Beck launching Rocket Lab from Mahia, and we were very excited to be involved in tracking its still a test, which is their first orbital satellite launch, and we actually had customers on board that spacecraft too. So we had 3 customers, Rocket Lab and his Pete's customers as well.
Fantastic. Great to know that's happening from New Zealand and that Peter Beck is from Invercargill, so very
That's right.
appropriate that we are here. So you're also involved in the ESPAS trial?
Yes, so we've got, I'm the primary investigator for the forestry trial, and it's quite fitting we're here because we've got equipment that's involved in precision positioning from satellites, and also being a ground station. I don't know if you can see it here, but basically part of the ESPAS is the ground station that sends the information, the corrections up, and we do calculations, we provide information on the corrections that there should be here. We're not actually involved this station here on this information going up, but another station in Australia is, but we like to think that it won't be too long before we have a station here, and Lynn's are working hard to get the funding for that, so I'm very confident.
Yeah, and it'll be great that the ground station can be the link in the communication and provide us all with more accurate information. And next you're going to find out why that information is important to the likes of forestry. But thanks very much, Robin, for showing us around the ground station. It's been great to find out how it works.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Robin.
The Awarua Satellite Ground Station from Learn NZ. And many thanks to Andrew Penney for the usage of that clip from Core Education, filmed in 2018. I should also mention Invercargill has amateur radio club rooms, branch 37 of the NZART, operating with the call sign ZL4CQ at 249 Ettrick Street, Invercargill, branch 37 of NZART. Quite commodious rooms with their own equipment. And they do lectures there, of course. They have a radio station there, and of course they put up their own antennas outside. Ettrick Street is up near Queen's Park, for those of you who know Invercargill. Equipped there, obviously, for telegraph as well. It's putting up an HF and VHF antenna. Looks a little on the primitive side, but anything that works. And they have field days that they do from caravans like this. And that's at Ettrick Street. So if you're in Invercargill, do call in to the local amateur radio club, NZART branch 37. I'm sure you'll get a nice reception there. At Awarua, the Unwin HF over-the-horizon radar is operated somewhat like our Jindalee project, but theirs is a companion station to the Tiger HF radar on South Bruny Island in Tasmania. It's actually on Bruny Island between Cloudy Bay and Lunawanna on South Bruny Island in a very remote locale. But let's have a little from ZL4OM Mike Bailey again on the subject of the Unwin radar at Awarua, HF over the horizon. There we see the two coverages of Bruny Island and the Unwin radar. Where they cross, they have particularly high resolution of the radar systems. Both of these facilities are pointed south towards the auroral zone, and both are funded by La Trobe University, Melbourne.
The last I heard is that it was not operating due to funding problems at La Trobe University. But the Unwin radar is built on the bottom end, I suppose, of the old ZLB. I had to remember our call sign. The old ZLB Awarua Radio site. It is a auroral radar, so it's looking primarily at the aurora and space weather, the ionosphere and everything that happens up there. And it's a twin to one that's on Bruny Island, and I believe there's another one in Australia as well. I was just looking up Adelaide. Yeah. So yeah, basically it's a stereo system, this one, I believe. There is an A and a B side to it, whereas Bruny Island and Adelaide are mono. So I don't know about how that works brilliantly, but I know it overlaps with Bruny Island, and they cover sort of the same area, and the idea is to get sort of views in a 2D or 3D, to a degree a 3D, view of what's going on down there. It was built in, would have been about 2007, I think. All done locally, by the university anyway, and all completely remotely controlled.
Does the OTH radar interfere with HF ham radio?
Output's only a grand sum of about 200 watts. That might be per antenna, but I'm not 100% sure. It used to give us a little bit of grief because it had all the bands preset into it, and so when it would hop across, it wouldn't interfere with us. There was a few times early on where it was noticed to be encroaching on the amateur bands, but that got all sorted really quickly. Unfortunately, the bad name sort of has stuck, but I know it hasn't been an issue for quite some time now, although that one time we went down to the Awarua Museum to do the Jock White contest, we might have just turned the power off to the radar that particular time. So yeah, it did cause a little bit of interference, and I must admit I haven't taken a radio down there to actually do any testing to see if the interference is still there, because it's the best way of telling if the radar's going or not. But yeah, it's still sitting there. I know the technicians are still going down to it and maintaining it. It's just a matter of whether it's turned on or not.
A major Invercargill export industry, thank you, Mike, a major Invercargill export industry these days is technical education via the Southern Institute of Technology, Invercargill. SIT launched, would you believe, zero-fee tuition programs some years back, attracting enormous student enrolments and boosting the local economy, but this is being phased out in 2024. A very clever way of attracting new expertise to the area. So here are some promotional videos.
Prepare yourself to take on the world from the city of Invercargill, where dreams are possible. Invercargill is a city with a big heart. Its vibrant, multicultural community welcomes all nationalities and faiths. Here you are able to find affordable living, within walking distance of your course and shopping centres. Many students have no need to spend money on transportation when living near Invercargill's easily accessible town centre. Sport lovers will find a multitude of high-level teams and clubs to support, as well as many leagues to join, whether you're after a bit of healthy competition or in it for the fun of the game. Local sporting facilities include a world-class indoor cycling velodrome, water-based hockey turf and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. If you are interested in socialising, Invercargill boasts excellent cafes and great culture, with live bands playing regularly at many establishments. Head out of the city and you'll find a wealth of stunning natural environments, from the coastal Catlins and Stewart Island to Fiordland, New Zealand's first national park and a UNESCO World Heritage Area. Invercargill has all the benefits of a big city without the noise, traffic and attitude. We are also close to other popular destinations like Queenstown, Te Anau and Dunedin. From here you will find opportunities to further explore New Zealand and New Zealand culture, while gaining qualifications for the world.
And now some specific departments relating to areas that might tie in with ham radio. Audio, broadcasting, electronics, all being taught at the Southern Institute of Technology, Invercargill.
This is SIT, Invercargill's own tertiary institute. Some of you will have heard of SIT's zero fee scheme.
But not everyone knows that SIT offers some of the best courses in the country.
With cutting-edge facilities and a hands-on industry focus. So enrol online and launch your future today!
The audio course at SIT.
Everything that's happening on stage, you can feel that the guitar is sitting in its own pocket, or the drums are perfectly going from left to right as the drummer's playing his piece, or the vocalist just sits in that spot just on top. The thing that I find the most enjoyable is that moment when you're sitting there at the back of the room, the artists are performing, and you can close your eyes and you can see and you can feel that part of live audio is the part that gives you all the warm fuzzies.
I've been a musician all my life, and it's taken me lots of places. I spent quite a bit of time in New York playing over there, and since coming back to New Zealand, I've set up a studio business.
That lets me roam.
Use that one that exists. The move down to Southland presented a lot more opportunities, and one of them being SIT, just an hour down the road from where I am. The idea that you need to be in a city to be a creative is not true. You can be anywhere, and if people want you to do what you do, if it's making music, they'll come to you.
My name's Miharo Gregory from Christchurch, studied in Invercargill, graduating in 2015. Currently I'm the keyboardist in LAB and a few other groups in Wellington. Yeah, I like the studio stuff because you hear your favourite records and you're like, man, how do I get that sound? As a musician, you learn it's like a phaser or whatever, and then you can build your own sound around it.
These sort of courses in a city of 57,000. Imagine if we could compete with this.
Knowledge of how that all works with recording and mixing and mastering is ideal for that, but also wanting to look into something along the lines of film music, so doing film soundtrack and lyrical composition for film, and how that all works as well.
Sure, not patching anything at all. So it's that easy. My tutors are the backbone for what I get to do, and quite a lot of the opportunities that I get to have, they're always there to help, and they always go out of their way to help you as best they can.
Smaller class sizes as well, less of the lecture theatre and more like one-on-one talk time.
There's a lot of equipment that is just a pleasure to get to play with down there. The facilities blew my mind, just an awesome studio facility, and a pleasure to think that kind of that's the classroom that I'll get to spend the next few years at. I didn't actually realise when I signed up for the audio school that there was the opportunity to do the double degree with music, so the timetables work and they're synced up so that you can do a bachelor degree in audio production and a bachelor degree in contemporary music simultaneously with no clashes of classes. It's the only school in the country where you can do that.
You know, look at the production industry as a whole. You've got everything from theatre to touring audio to corporate audio. All of them are busy.
I'm leaning and have been doing a lot of work lately in live audio. Big gigs, Rhythm and Alps, Bay Dreams again, Electric Ave. So there's a lot of live audio prospects out there.
It's a very broad course, which I think is really good. So whether people want to end up in studio world or live world, like you get a taste of everything in it.
Understanding the science of how sound works, and I've taken a lot away from that, especially on how to use my spaces better and the acoustics side of it.
Whether you're wanting to go into live sound or whether you're wanting to work in a studio, or whether you're just wanting to set up your own studio in your bedroom, it gives you a good basis to start from.
Southern Institute of Technology, Invercargill, and they also offer...
I'm from Invercargill and I'm studying electrical engineering theory at SIT. I chose to study at SIT because of the zero fees, the Tim Shadbolt accommodation grocery. It's really handy. It's close, it's local. I wanted to stay down here, stay with my friends and family and that. The theory definitely is challenging, but you've just got to really push through and ask questions. I think that's the biggest thing, is definitely ask if you don't understand something. Yeah, it's really well set up. It was amazing. Like I thought we'd just have like 2 soldering irons, but there's enough for like everyone in the class. And at the end of the year, we'll do our circuit board to wire that all up. It's amazing. Like you drive around and you'll look at like power poles and stuff and just point out wee bits of this. Oh yeah, like you actually know how things work. Yeah, it's quite cool. I'm hoping for an apprenticeship. That's the main goal to get out of it. I'm thinking PowerNet, which is still kept locally, and no, it's awesome. And because it's only a year, like a year's nothing to your life. So if you're a bit unsure, I think it's good, like go for it.
Electrical engineering.
Kia ora whānau. My name's James Wilkinson. I'm one of the film, animation and gaming tutors here at SIT. We've got a range of courses here, but our main one is the Bachelor of Screen Arts. And within that we have multiple strands that we deliver. So you can do focus on animation, gaming, film. Next year we're going to be adding some new strands. So we're going to have content creation, digital design, which is that sort of a design-based paper. And we've got the new fashion design strand and also a concept art strand. So I'm involved mainly in the film course, and we really teach a broad spectrum of all the different roles that are assigned, because the outcome for this course is that you can go and work directly in the industry, starting at the beginning of any department, really. So we teach right across camera, audio, editing, there's directing, and throughout the 3 years you work on multiple film projects. So in first year you work on like making a music video with working with music students. Second year you work making a couple of short films, and then third year you really get to focus on your major project, and you can work either making a documentary or narrative short film, or you can work on like a pilot for a web series. It sort of allows the students in their third year to really focus on and narrow down the aspect of filmmaking they want to get into more. I was very fortunate to get an internship on a feature film that shot down here, Two Little Boys, which really set me off, and worked on multiple different jobs after that. But really my background was working in production with the AD team, which was with the extras, was the extra coordinator on Two Little Boys. Seeing students grasping new concepts that I think a lot of people come in with a perception about what filmmaking is, and then once they actually have a crack at it, they realise that it takes a lot of people working together as a family to really pull off a nice film. For me, I get a kick out of the students just achieving, really, and trying to help them to make the best film that they can. So yeah, one of the big things I think the students enjoy here at SIT is the hands-on aspect of the course, working together to create films together. So everyone gets to crew in different roles on each other's films. So you get a turn directing, but then you also, you'll do sound for someone else, or you do camera for someone else, and you get to learn a lot of the different roles. But it's all hands-on the equipment, learning right from the beginning. If you're interested in film, come down, do it. Nothing holding you back.
And this is VK3AML with a regular Saturday night test transmission on 147.475 and a live stream which you can get if you Google VK3AML 29 October 2022 and see the videos that go with this audio. At the moment we're covering the work of the Southern Institute of Technology in educating people in broadcasting, television, electronics. They've been among the first in the world to institute courses with zero fees, and that's gone on for some years. But with the amalgamation of this institute with others in New Zealand, it's unlikely that that will continue. And there is an alternative view of Invercargill, which is somewhat depressing. But at the moment, Invercargill is at the turning point, and I'd like to present to you this next piece, which I've got permission to show from Callum Turnbull, the digital and social content producer for renews.co.nz. RE News. I was very fortunate to get their permission to screen this. And warning, there is some fairly fruity language in this, describing Invercargill as being, how can I put this, intercoursed. But I wouldn't dismiss the old Invercargill quite yet, not after what we've seen. On to the investigation into Invercargill. Like any remote locality, Invercargill has its fair share of problems as well as potentials. Two of Invercargill's major industries, education at SIT and employment at the TY aluminium smelter, are under threat. And you'll hear about those threats.
Invercargill's looking a bit fucked. This city, which Mick Jagger once described as the arsehole of the world, is experiencing a deluge of challenges right now. Whole streets are almost completely shut down for renovations that some fear will never come, and the potential closure of two of its primary industries have left it looking like one of the bleakest places in the country to be a young person. We headed down to Invers to find out how bad things really are. What do you guys think of the state of Invercargill right now?
No comment.
No comment?
It's a bit messed up.
It's just a bit messed up. I got nothing positive to say at the moment.
I used to, not anymore.
What did you used to think was great about Invercargill?
I loved it. Everyone was, here to work, have a good time, and no one's here to work and have a good time anymore.
Do you think that that's reflective of how a lot of young people feel about the city right now?
Yeah.
Big majority.
What's the conversation at your school at the moment around wanting to stay in Invercargill?
Nearly all my friends aren't staying, so the majority of them are either going to Otago or Auckland, so I wasn't planning to stay.
Two of the city's economic pillars are shaking, with one of the area's biggest employers, the TY smelter, possibly closing down, which would lose Invercargill 2,500 related jobs and $500 million in annual revenue, and the Southern Institute of Technology likely to lose most of its students under proposed changes to national polytechnics. In 2001, the Southern Institute of Technology made the bold move of introducing a zero-fees scheme, making them the only tuition-free tertiary education provider in Aotearoa. However, in 2019, the government announced they plan to amalgamate all of the country's polytechs into one national institute. This amalgamation will likely mean SIT will lose their zero-fees scheme, which will have huge consequences for the city. The zero-fees scheme at SIT has been a huge drawcard for Invercargill. And the year before zero fees was introduced, there were only 1,500 full-time students at SIT, and in recent years there's been almost 5,000. More importantly is how many of these students are coming from outside of Invercargill, with almost 40% of students coming from elsewhere in New Zealand or overseas. And this has become one of the main lines of Invercargill introducing new people and talent into the community, with 35 to 50% of graduates from here staying and working in Invercargill. What drew you guys down to study at SIT instead of going to a polytech like in Auckland or even around the Bay of Islands?
It was definitely the zero fees scheme. It's a lot cheaper.
If you guys have been looking for a polytech to study at and Invercargill and SIT didn't have zero fees scheme, would you have thought to come down here?
I guess not.
Probably
no. No, definitely not.
Alongside education to draw people to Invercargill, the city needs opportunities to keep them here. For the past 50 years, one of the region's biggest employers has been the TY Point aluminium smelter, a massive facility south of Invercargill that is the country's only creator of aluminium. As one of the region's largest employers, the loss of TY would be an incredible blow to the already struggling city. The smelter's owners, Rio Tinto, are currently reviewing whether to close the plant or downsize, mostly due to power infrastructure costs, which they say are unfair and are petitioning the government to reduce. You see, this smelter requires 13% of all power generated in New Zealand to run. So much power, in fact, that when the owners of the smelter proposed building it in the 1960s, they actually needed to build a whole new power station to do so, and proposed to build the Manapori power station in Fiordland. Over the following decades, the owners of the Tiwai smelter and the government have been in a constant tussle over obligations and pricing around power generated at Manapori. This current Fight for Fairness campaign says that it's unfair that Tiwai has had to spend $200 million in infrastructure costs to move some of this power up north.
The government clearly sees a lot of worth in the smelter for the region, bailing it out with a $30 million grant in 2013, which then Prime Minister John Key said would be the last. But Tiwai don't see changes in transmission pricing as a bailout. They see it as fixing a flawed system, a system which is currently being evaluated by the Electricity Authority. But the Tiwai operators say the expected drop in costs from this review wouldn't be applied for 4 or 5 years, which would be too late. And so, under the weight of the current costs, the plant's owners Rio Tinto are currently reviewing whether to downsize or shut down Tiwai, leaving the 2,500 people whose employment relies on the plant worried for their futures. One of these workers is Glenn Fitzgerald, who's been at the Tiwai smelter for the past 8 years.
Putting up a new garage at the moment, so decided that I'd borrow some more money against the house. Went to see the bank and they lent me $50,000. A week after I confirmed that, Tiwai came out and said they were closing, but my property might not be worth as much.
The conversation around Tiwai, what is it like at the moment? Are there people who are angry, upset? What does that look like?
I think there's probably a lot of young families in that probably concerned that, sort of big mortgages probably couldn't handle paying their mortgage with a lower paying job and all that sort of thing. It hangs over people's head, but
because that's the thing, is that it's not just that Tiwai is such a big employer, it's that it's like a really well-paying employer.
Yeah. Well, it's the best paying in Southland probably, so.
So let's say Tiwai does close and you lose your job there and you did want to stick around in Invercargill, what would your options look like, do you think?
Hopefully I could find a job that would still fund my mortgage, but yeah.
Where would you look?
Good question.
The Invercargill Chamber of Commerce and Smelter are campaigning to have the government reduce their infrastructure obligations. I went along to one of their rallies.
A strategic review has never been called at Tiwai. It's a fairly serious process, it's something which Rio Tinto conducts rarely, and in this case it's looking at 3 options for the smelter. The first one is our ideal scenario, and that is full production but at a serious, significant reset in power pricing. The second option is looking at curtailment. So at the moment we've got 4 potlines running at the smelter. It's looking at reducing that to 3 or 2 potline operation.
I'll be opening for QSOs on 147.475 in 3 minutes. This is VK3AML, coverage of Invercargill, New Zealand.
That would also require a fairly significant reset in power price. And the third option which is being considered is closure. And so that's involved a series of meetings and people coming to site to understand what would that process look like, what would it cost, and how would we go about doing it.
So how long have you been at Tiwai?
Just over 5 years. I'm a chemical engineer who kind of looks after planning and production and improvement projects. Without Tiwai, there's not a whole lot of options for me in Southland. If there are no opportunities at 1 or 2 other workplaces, then we'd have to leave the region. It would mean that we'd have to sell our house and leave Southland and start again somewhere, and the kids would have to leave their lives, and Invercargill's a great place for a family.
Tim Shabot has been Mayor of Invercargill for much of the past 30 years. He's seen the city through some of its highest highs and now through one of its lowest lows.
It feels at the moment like we're a city under siege. There's so many issues that are coming up and coming at us. I just wonder what's going to be emerging next.
Yo, Tim. Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. The sun's actually come out again.
Yes, the sun always shines in Invercargill.
Southland and Invercargill are experiencing an unprecedented number of challenges all at once at the moment. But you've been mayor down here for the last 21 years. How does this compare to challenges that the city's faced in the past?
Well, I think we're better off than in the past because I arrived here in 1993 and we were the fastest declining city in New Zealand or Australia.
Right.
Present conditions, economically especially, are bountiful compared with what they were in those days. If we hadn't been through it before, I think we'd probably be more nervous, but we've been through some tough times down here, and we've come through it in remarkably good shape.
You guys worried about the future of the city?
Yeah, I guess worried, but I don't want to be here much longer, so...
Yeah.
My kids won't be growing up here in the way this is going now.
And thanks for Renews for the usage of that clip. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. Just adjusting my levels there. About to open on 2 metres for Callback, I guess. I have a lot of people to thank for the clips used tonight. Sincerely, it's been a fascinating view of a part of New Zealand that gets a very bad rap. If you are a tourist from Australia and are looking to tour New Zealand, Invercargill isn't on any of the tours. And when I got to Invercargill and saw what it had to offer, radio museums, the gateway to Stewart Island, the gateway to the wilderness area of the southern Fiordland, 3 major motor museums, the Southern Institute of Technology with its extraordinary courses in electronics and broadcasting and audio. It's a city that's inexplicably had a very bad rap internationally, and I decided tonight that any place that had such a bad rap deserved to get some coverage. So with great thanks to Mike Groth, VK7MJ, who got us down there in the first instance in 2019, to Radio Southland particularly, to whom I listen almost as assiduously as I listen to local radio stations. Look up Radio Southland on internet. You can stream their programs for yourself, and particularly look up the programs produced by Mike Bailey, ZL4OM, and his wife Rachel Bailey. They're science commentators for a weekly science show that they have on that station. And it really has dug into the available talent, the expertise, the intellectuals within Invercargill to produce a unique, isolated, extremely southern part of the world in radio form. And its manager, Darren Ludlow, has become so involved with local politics, he actually ran for mayor. Missed out slightly. A new mayor has just come in Invercargill, Nobby Clark. We're looking forward to more hard-hitting fights to see the survival of the town. From the Awarua Radio Museum, with great thanks to ZL4OM Mike Bailey, who I'm proud to call a friend. He's been on my Facebook list for many years. We exchange messages regularly, and I'm hoping he's going to become a semi-regular part of our video presentations and audio presentations on 147.475 from New Zealand. He's so heavily involved with every electronic aspect of what goes on with communication down there. To the Invercargill Amateur Radio Club, 249 Ettrick Street, thank you to them. Southern Institute of Technology, thank you for letting me use your promotional videos to give some view of what your courses are like. And to Callum Turnbull, who's the digital and social content producer for re.news.co.nz. Thank you for that final clip. I know it's a slightly depressing aspect of Invercargill, but it's worth seeing all sides, particularly from the point of view of Aussies who haven't had much experience of that part of the world. The weather may be bleak, the winds may be horrendous, but the people and the activities there are extraordinary for a city of just 57,000. Salute to Invercargill. So with that, now we'll open up on 147.475. He said, changing his monitoring so he can hear, which he has done. And hopefully the monitoring will work. We'll now stand by for any calls on 147.475. This is VK3AML calling CQ and standing by. And we've got no monitoring. And we've got no monitoring. I don't know what's going on. Oh, I know. I've just got to check something here. I'm not sure whether we're connected. We're not. Oh dear. Cable. Where does the cable go? Apologies, folks. We'll get this right eventually. Okay, let's try that again. VK3AML calling CQ, standing by.
Yeah, VK3ECG.
VK3BA in Bannockburn.
And VK3ACZ.
Sorry about the delay, gents. This week, because of the interviews I'd done on Zoom, I'd rewired the shack a little bit for recording. VK3ECG, VK3BA, VK3ACZ. First of all, we'll take Dave. And I hope the obscure, from Australians' point of view, subject matter of this week's material wasn't too far off the beam for you, Dave. VK3ECG and the group, how have you been? VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group, VK3ECG. Yes, very good. Yes, fascinating. It's a lovely video of the museum. I must say, they've got some wonderful stuff there. And very varied, of course, in terms of what it's covering. So it's been a fascinating thing to watch again, as usual. And whilst I said, well, I never made it actually to Invercargill. I spent a bit of time in Dunedin and so on, which has always been one of my sort of favourite places to visit. So it certainly is. It's a lovely part of the world, even if the weather does get a little bit on the bleak side from time to time. But it's been a good week. It's been actually a very busy week for me. So I really haven't done an awful lot on the radio front. I've had we had a delegation of individuals from Iraq with us this week at work, and so I spent some time with them, and also spoke at a conference at Melbourne Uni this week. Gave evidence in court, had 2 or 3 choir rehearsals for various things coming up in the Christmas music season. So it's been that sort of week. I've also been playing around a little bit with exploring other aspects of WireDex on the Yaesu fusion system, which has been a little bit of fun, and hopefully a bit more of that tomorrow, and get things configured and learning how to use the various nodes and internet linking and things like that. So that's what's happening on that front. Anyway, back to you, Chris. VK3AML on the group, VK3ECG.
You wouldn't believe, Dave, the number of times I've heard people say, I never made it to Invercargill. It's one of the most common things I've heard from people visiting New Zealand. I think partly it's because it's dropped off the majority of the majority of. Hang on, I've got some funny flickering noise. Oh, it's coming from the sound card. This computer has an internal sound card which I'm going to have to supersede with an external sound card because it picks up switching noise. Sounds like sort of a clattering noise in the very distant background on about 40 dB down. Probably won't be heard over the air, but it's certainly audible in my headphones. Even the time my wife and I and Mike all went over there, we didn't get to Invercargill. We didn't see any of its attractions advertised, which I think is fairly reprehensible on the part of the New Zealand government. And the same thing applies to Stewart Island, which I'll probably cover in a video 2 weeks from now, when I do my next Saturday night session. I won't be on next Saturday. I don't want to destroy my social life by having every Saturday occupied, but Saturday week I'll be doing a little bit on Stewart Island, which is off the southern coast of the South Island of New Zealand, and a fascinating place in itself. The end of the Australasian plank in terms of going south. Wires X I can do on this radio apparently, but I'm not quite sure whether it's a digital version of Wires X or whether it's just some sort of internet linking system. Never had it explained to me, and I've never actually used it. But with that, I'll go over to VK3BA and remind me of your name, please. I just can't bring it to mind at the moment. Mind you, I've been a bit pressured with the lead connections here being all in disarray. VK3BA in Bannockburn. Hope my signal's getting through okay. It's only running 30 watts. VK3AML.
Yeah, good evening, Chris. VK3AML, VK3BA in Bannockburn. The name this way is Nick, November India Kilo. I'll just make sure you receive me okay before I continue on, Chris, because the signal has dropped off a little bit. I've got you at about a strength 6. Had you at about an 8 about an hour ago, but has dropped back to a 6. Just making sure you receive me okay, Chris. Over.
Absolutely fine, Nick. Go ahead.
No worries, Chris. VK3AML, VK3BA in Bannockburn, west of Geelong, just running 100 watts. I think power supply should keep up tonight. I've changed it over to an iMark linear supply, so the old ICOM power supply at full 100 watts used to get a bit cranky after a couple of hours, but yeah, no, good signal from you tonight, Chris. So better than the last couple of weeks on 2 metres. Excellent video, excellent live stream tonight, Chris. Just when I thought the last one was pretty good, you just keep excelling yourself. So job well done. Keep up the good work, and always enjoy your live streams there, Chris. And if I do happen to miss them on the rare occasion, I watch them a few days later. So just got a few notes here. Radio Southland. Yeah, excellent video by the station manager there. Just a shame he had to video it in portrait rather than landscape, but I guess that's what TikTok does to a few people these days. So, and for streaming broadcast stations around Australia and the world, I've was put onto an app on the phone called Radio Garden. Or even you can go on the website as well, Radio Garden, and it gets for some of those stations it gets past all the membership requirements or the paywall. So, like even to stream 3AW, you've sometimes got to have a membership or whatever. But I regularly stream Burke to WEB up there in Burke. On 580 kilohertz, but it's a good independent radio station, good one to listen to. The Radio Museum, what an excellent display they've got. That is the duck's guts. The way they've done the lighting, the labelling, the display, the posters on the wall, the general display and the production of the whole show. That museum was absolutely excellent there down at Invercargill. So that was they've done a really excellent job there. And I think I noted recently, a week ago, I read a few of the club newsletters around the place, and I was reading the Shepparton one last week, and I think they made mention that, hang on, short break. They made mention that they might look at taking over part of the old Radio Australia site at Shepparton to set up a radio museum and try and get some funding. So I'll have to reread that newsletter from the Shepparton Club and to make sure I'm not haven't got my wires crossed. The audio engineering courses, yeah, well, back in the day when I did my basic electronics certificate down at Warrnambool for a year, I don't think it cost me anything. It might have been $450. And then I did a 4-year apprenticeship after that in telecommunications, and I did have to pay for it, Chris. I actually got paid to go and do it, so I got a wage out of it. So it wasn't very much in the first 12 months to give you the tip, but anyway, it paid for the board and the fuel and an apprenticeship night at Wednesday night in Ballarat at the various nightclubs. So yeah, good work on an excellent live stream tonight, Chris. I'll be around for another round. And good evening to everyone else. VK3AML, VK3BA in Pennyburn, west of Geelong there, Chris. Back to you.
Very nice signal there, Nick. And I envy you being able to run 100 watts. I'd be curious to know what sort of equipment it is and whether it's actually capable of 100% duty cycle, because the best I can do with 100% here is about 30 watts. And that's with an extra exhaust fan on the radio that I'm using, which is a FT7900. It has an assisted fan, big one, about 15 centimetres diameter, sucking air through the thing. Every now and then I have to stick a vacuum cleaner on it to get all of the accumulated dust out. Otherwise the radio tends to get a little bit hot under the collar. So if you do have any idea of how I can get the signal up to the maximum legal, which I think is 100 watts, I'd be appreciative. My antenna is rated at I think 100 watts, so it should be able to take it. Radio Southland, yes. I tried to go in myself with a camera, and you can imagine people hearing a mad Aussie asking, can I take my camera in there? It must be a bit threatening, but I think perhaps the hint was taken and they started putting stuff up on YouTube, including that portrait format tour that you saw there, taken by one of the girls inside the station, by the looks of it, with a mobile phone of some kind. Well, it's a lot better than nothing, and it gives you a good view of the mood of the place, which is friendly, cooperative, inviting, which what I was trying to do with Awarua by the same token, as was ZL4 OM Mike, who, to give you some idea of how cooperative he was, Mike and I, VK7MJ, Mike Groth and I, lobbed into Invercargill and only knew about the Awarua Museum sort of as an afterthought, almost leaving the place. And we rang up on spec. Mike was the secretary, I think, of the organisation, and he was prepared to come into the place and open it up for us, specifically for us to do that video. It wasn't the normal opening time. So I'm eternally indebted to Mike ZL4OM, and I hope he's listening, not only for that, but subsequent friendship and the interview which we did, I think, on Tuesday this week. I want to do another interview with Mike, actually, about the Unwin radar, because I think Over the Horizon radar would make a very interesting Saturday session. And as it's controlled by La Trobe University, Dr. Devlin, I think, is in charge of it up there. I may be able to wangle an interview with Dr. Devlin talking about not only Awarua, but its companion station at Bruny Island. And interestingly, Mike 7MJ now lives at Margate, south of Hobart, which is literally over the other side of the Doncaster Channel from Bruny Island. So next time I'm over in Hobart, likely to be this summer, Mike and I just might beat a path down that very rough track to the Bruny Island Over the Horizon radar and take some hopefully clear pictures, as long as it doesn't get us thrown in irons and taken to Guantanamo Bay or something similar. Anyway, with that, I'll hand it over to Peter VK3ACZ. Oh, thanks for the information on Shepparton too. I had heard that they're talking about putting a radio museum into one of the old Radio Australia buildings, and one would hope that that would include a working ham radio station as well. Over to Peter VK3ACZ, VK3AML, standing by.
VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ. Good evening, Chris. Good evening, Big Nick, and good evening, Dave, and listeners. Well, first of all, I'd like to add my name to your list of people who didn't quite make it to Invercargill, but looking at what I saw in your video tonight, I certainly wish I had. It looked very, very nice. And as for Mick Jagger's comment about Invercargill being the butthole of the world, he's got that dead wrong. Port Pirie in South Australia is my idea of the worst place I've ever seen in the world. Certainly the worst in Australia, but I won't go any further into that. A risk of upsetting any VK5s. 3BA, the big Australian, Nick, he's 4x3 with me. I may not be heard down there at Bannockburn at all, but he's doing very well to get up here to my location, because he's got to get over the hill that you're probably sitting on top of, Chris. Now, what else have I got? Oh, Over the Horizon radar. Yes, Chris, that would make a very interesting broadcast. I'd be all ears for that one. Being a HFer as I am, certainly afflicted with it from time to time, and I'd love to know what they are each time, you know, whether to go to be crook at the Russians or the Chinese or whoever else it might be. I know that on 20 metres sometimes the Over the Horizon radar is interfering, and DX stations will say, or in Europe will say, oh yeah, that's the Russians causing interference, and then I'll speak to a JA who'll say, oh no, it's the Chinese. So I don't know if there's a definitive way to know. I know there's a website that's got recordings of the sounds that the different radars make, but there's a few odd ones that come in now and again. There are some that only give a blast for a few seconds, and there are others that can go for hours. They can be very, or when I say not very, they can be narrow, like 20 kilohertz wide on a band, or they can take up 200 kilohertz. So one thing I always say to myself, if I'm on 15 metres and I see the Over the Horizon radar on the band scope, I say, well, propagation's obviously good because whoever they are using it. Anyway, enough of that. CQ Worldwide contest this weekend. I've been out at One Tree Hill because it was raining for a lot of this afternoon, and I can't really say I've had a great time of it. There was a bit of storm activity later on, which seemed to knock out the long path to Europe a little bit, around about 7 p.m.ish, but still plenty of signals on the band. I'm just looking at the 20-metre band scope, and there's plenty happening. Who knows what it'll be on 40, because that could be our neighbours to the north doing their chanting or whatever. But anyway, back to you, Chris. As always, thank you for your usual great broadcast tonight. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Do we have any other breakers for the callback? No, it looks like the three of us, four of us actually, is the go. Well, it's interesting about the Over the Horizon radar, and congratulations even trying to get out and about on a week like we've had with so much rain. I've never seen it. I can't recall ever having seen it constantly raining like it has this spring, I should say. I've been reading papers on the Awarua radar and the Bruny Island radar. You can imagine there are some military applications for that never get to print. But the Bureau of Meteorology has done an extensive paper available as PDF on the internet on the usage of the Bruny Island and Awarua radar for tracking wind speed and direction and wave heights in the Southern Ocean. If you can imagine, the waves tend to appear regularly like a diffraction grating that would work at HF frequencies, 8 to 18 megahertz, and the reflections from a sea with those regular waves would tend to, by Doppler shift, depending on which way they're going in the sea, give you a reading of wind speed and direction via the wave heights. So a lot of work is going on with meteorology using the system. They're also trying to develop a picture of the shape of the ionosphere above the ground using those radars to increasingly, because they're so widely separated, Bruny Island, Awarua, across the Tasman Sea, they can get a stereoscopic view by reflection at HF of what's happening, not only on the surface of the ground, but up above. One can only imagine what the military applications might be. Tracking ships, certainly, aircraft, possibly, perhaps even shallowly submerged submarines with greater magnetic attraction if they're made of a ferrous metal. Maybe they're detectable below the surface of the water. Who knows? With the military applications of over-the-horizon radar, one can only speculate. But it's interesting speculation. There is quite a bit of material available on OTH radar, particularly relating to Awarua, relating to the Jindalee project, which is in Central Australia, looking northwest. Some of the papers relating to Awarua and Bruny Island indicate that they can be turned around and pointed north. God help us if Bruny Island is transmitting radar towards Melbourne on 20 metres. But I think OTH radar, in terms of ham radio, gets a very bad rap. And what I'd like to do in approaching Dr. Devlin is to say, is this a bad rap that's been intentionally caused by the usage of frequencies, including the amateur band, or is it from authorities, Russia, China, that may not have much respect for amateur operation in the West, or is indeed it due to Awarua and Unwin radar? Perhaps we can defuse the whole amateur worry about HF radars by getting something authoritative in the way of an interview. I'll hand it back to Dave. We'll have one more round and then I'll try to open up Zoom. Didn't succeed last week, but I think it's going to work this week. VK3CG and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3ECG. Yes, unfortunately, Nick, I can't hear you. I'm not quite sure. It's presumably just my location. I usually get things a little bit weaker, particularly from the north and a little bit west and so on. That seems to be not so great for me. But allowing for the time and delay and so on, I just remain listening around on the video and YouTube, so that I can follow that. Interesting. Yes, I'll have to have a look at that Radio Garden site and see if what I can hear there. That'll be interesting. And I have been looking at the listening a little bit to the CQ Worldwide net today, but as you say, there was quite a bit of interesting stuff from Japan, of course, on 10 metres, but the weather has been appalling today and has been some very odd sort of patterns, as you point out, Peter. Yes, I've not really, apart from hearing, I'm sure some of the Horizon radar systems, it's certainly a very interesting technology, and actually surprisingly older technology than people might think. But obviously you've got the sort of ground wave effects, and also then the skip systems, and whilst of course I'm no doubt they have relevant sort of military interests as radar does generally, they've also I think been used quite a lot, as you say, for both weather but also for other monitoring that's less related to military but relates more to dealing with shipping and unregistered vessels doing strange things and things like that. So I think it's got some interesting possibilities in those areas as well. But as you say, if things started to hammer across cities, I think we'd have some really interesting problems to face. Yes, we will, as pointed out, the weather's been pretty awful here. So Peter, if you're out running portable, I have my sympathies. Every time I try to do anything today, it seems to bucket with rain. And in between, when I wasn't trying to do something outside, the sun came out. I suppose that's pretty typical for Melbourne for this time of year, but it's really been a bit heavy and depressing, and I still haven't managed to do any grass cutting, which I need to do desperately, because it's just been so wet I can't get out of there and get any of it done. So there we are. But as I said, I've had one of those fairly busy weeks, so it's actually been quite pleasant being able to have a bit of a rest. Sort of family things last weekend on the Sunday, as it was my birthday, which was nice, and did a little bit of shopping and things today as well. So it's been an incredibly busy week, and I even tried to fit some of the radio stuff in. I'll have a go with. I thought I'd have a bit more of a go with the Wireless X. So I'm just sort of setting things up and getting the handheld to couple into the main mobile rig I'm using here, and then the HRI linked to the computer. It's all working. I've forwarded all my ports correctly on my internet router and stuff like that. So that's all working perfectly well. And I'm just really now learning a little bit about how the different rooms work and things like that. So it'll be a little bit of fun this week to sort of iron out the wrinkles and get that sort of working smoothly. Anyway, back to you. VK3AML and the group, VK3ECG.
Best of luck with that, Dave. And in terms of the CQ worldwide, I've just noticed 3BA, Nick, on text chat has said that he didn't have terribly good, or Ardran rather, said that he didn't have very good results today either. He said HF was pretty variable. I could only pick up a few FT8 stations on 40 metres at about 3 p.m. So it confirms what you were saying, Peter. The conditions are not great. And Nick asks me, Chris, how old is that coffee cup? About 40 years old. We had a lot of those in the woodshed. Lusterware. Oh, and I've just wet the desk by turning it on the side. I'll get out my handkerchief and dry that up. First major disaster of the night. Thank goodness there's nothing more significant. This cup is a souvenir of a very dear old friend who departed this life in 2006, the original VK3AML, Tony Sanderson, one of the most exceptional people in almost every respect that I ever met. Best man at my wedding in 1993. I knew him from 1969. He was 9 years older than myself, born in April 1945. And he was brought up as an only child, as I was, and his thing with radio was communicating outside the family circle, as it was with me. Trying to get some stimulation from people of like mind, which I suppose is a lot of the motivation these days underlying amateur radio and most communication systems of a personal, nature. And Tony always used to offer you heavily brewed strong coffee in one of these. This is actually one that Tony had. I don't know whether I can actually insert a photograph to show you, but just recently in my hard disk drive, now how can I do this? VLC, video source, image, browse images. Here we go, I can do it. This is what Tony used to look like. I'll just have to drag this up here and take my own image off. There we go, that's Tony. We knew him as the Branch. I think it was partly because the PMG communications, the PMG radio branch spent half their time round at his place trying to find something to cop him for. That photo was taken around 2004. I'll just enlarge it to full size there, and you can see the same lustreware cup sitting next to his elbow as I'm using at the moment. That very cup sitting next to an ashtray, and that was the thing that killed him. He was a Marlboro packet-a-day man from age 16. You can't do that for most of your life and get away with it, and he died at the age of 61 in 2006, leaving a wife and 2 children, one late teens, one early 20s, and now the daughter has had 2 children of her own, and Tony's widow and my wife are kind of real grandma and surrogate grandma respectively. So Tony Sanderson, the original 3AML, sadly missed. And that's the first time I've inserted a photograph. I'll have to memorise how I did that. So quite often with this streaming, I can never remember the commands that are required. Okay, it's on to Nick, and then on to Peter. VK3BA, just can you actually do 100% duty cycle on that 100 watts, or are you pushing it, Nick? VK3BA, VK3AML.
Yeah, no, I was there, Chris. VK3AML, VK3BA in the group returning. Signal starting to go for a little bit of a dive. It's down to about a 5x6 now. So and Peter ACZ, I couldn't hear anyone else except you there, Chris. But I've got the live stream going in the. I'm mixing the live stream audio with the radio audio through the Allen and Heath mixer here. So I'm just dealing with the 15 to 20 seconds latency. So that's the only way I'm hearing everyone else down in Melbourne. So there we go there. Yeah, no, the IC 9100 Chris, which I've had, she was 10 years now, was sort of a replacement for the old 910H, but this does a better job. It doesn't get as hot, and the fan doesn't kick in as early, so actually I haven't heard the fan kick in at all tonight, yeah, no, she hauls the mail. It does pretty well. I haven't sort of really, I've got a 9700 as well, but I haven't really tested it at 100 watts on 2 metres and
testing
for FMDX, but I've got that set up mainly just for the sideband sort of stuff, but there we are. What else was I going to say? I wrote a few more notes down here. Peter, yeah, you talk about Port Pirie being the worst place on the earth. I don't know. Maybe you haven't been to Bourke. In my line of work, I work all over Victoria, and in the last couple of years it's involved a fair chunk of New South Wales as well, up as far as Bourke and Cunnamulla, and yeah, Burke's an interesting place, and North Burke is far better. So 7 k's over the river, and North Burke is a very nice place. Spent nearly 7 weeks up there last year, so working around the place. Otherwise, I was going to mention Queanbeyan, but maybe I shouldn't, in case we've got a few people on the live stream tonight. Might upset a few, so I'll leave that one alone. Queanbeyan's an interesting place for other reasons. So I'll try and keep it positive, Chris, so I'll leave that one. The reefs, I dropped you an email earlier tonight, Chris, but you're probably having, hang on, short break. Probably having roast lamb or something tonight. The Reefs, Hobart, has got their conference and expo next weekend, and a few weeks ago I was looking at getting the ferry across, but from the new Geelong port, but she's fully booked out till late November, so but you can join up online for about $22. I think they'll send you an invite for Zoom, I think the day before, so you can get an invite to live stream for the Saturday conference. And I think on the Sunday expo they've got ICOM Australia heading down with a fleet of ICOM stuff, including the IC905, which does everything up to from 2 metres up to 10 gigs. So Hayden, VK7HH, otherwise known as Ham Radio DX on YouTube, has been lucky enough to get that organised. Then there's the Rosebud Hamfest, I think in a few weeks, and then the VHF UHF Field Day as well, which I hope to work with Damien and KQ and Ralph LL out there southwest of Ballarat. That's about all from this way, Chris, but otherwise a fine live stream this evening. I thought the last one was flash, but you just keep getting better and better, so keep up the good work and enjoy the live stream there, Chris. Back to you, Vicky, and good evening all, and might see you on Zoom later on. VK3AML, VK3BA.
I can't hear your audio, Chris.
I can hear you, whoever that was. Hello?
Okay, I can hear you now. Yep,
you can hear me now?
Rolling.
Okay,
yeah,
just hang on a sec, I'll bring you up.
You can hear me, Chris?
Yeah, I can hear you, Terry. No problem.
Okay.
It looks like we're going to Zoom, so Peter's there, so I can now... Oh, somebody's got the loudspeaker on.
Oops, sorry.
Now, I'm not sure which side of this microphone to talk into. It's supposed to be directional, but it can go that way or that way. Dear, oh dear. G'day, Rolly.
It's working.
It's been a
Either way, it's working anyway.
Okay. I hope that coverage of Invercargill accords with your approval, particularly as a New Zealander.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah, lovely. I mean, the whole part of that whole section of the South Island is quite fascinating, really.
The thing that I find most fascinating about it is how little it gets promoted in Melbourne, particularly. Just hang on a sec, I've got to get the lighting right here.
Yeah, just about anything south of Dunedin sort of loses dimension, really, doesn't it?
That's about it. I think a lot of people think that Aussies can't stand the cold weather, but I actually find it's much more easy to rug up for cold weather than it is to strip off for hot.
That bottom section of the South Island there in what we call the Catlins is a absolutely fascinating country. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, we did that,
and quite a different climate too. You'll notice that in South Otago in the summer they got all the sprinklers out in the paddocks and sprinkling water here, there, and everywhere. As soon as you get into the Catlins, there's none of those sprinklers there at all. It's a totally different sort of eco-climate, and it's absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find. There it is, sharpen. Okay. And I'm sharpening you all up. That's better.
Guess you've got a likely looking bunch here tonight.
Yes, I've got quite a few. And, Dennis, g'day. How's Canberra?
G'day, guys. Very good, very good. I was thinking about us, the worst end of the world is Wilcannia.
Wilcannia?
Wilcannia.
What makes
Warren comes a pretty close second.
I was thinking of Rafa, I have to say.
You haven't been to some of the places in the Pacific that I've been to then.
That bad?
There's a few experiences in PNG I had. I think was had certainly some interesting aspects to them.
Yeah.
What did you find particularly bad, Rolly? Was it a case of coming away with mosquito bites and malaria or something, or what exactly? It's usually people's experience.
I mean, that's just the start. Coming from a first world country type thing, and you go into third world type scenarios, the biggest frustration is to try and get things done. So I'm there on a very limited time. I'm there to fix a radio station. I'm only there for 3 days or something like that. Well, if you need any, you better take everything that you need for yourself.
Right.
So if you do need something, you got to go and source it and try and get it from somewhere. Then you get the we'll have that tomorrow.
Yes. Yep.
Scenario, but that tomorrow never comes. So you just got to make up your mind that if you're going to go to into an area like that, then you better take everything that you possibly need. The classic example, and this is really is quite amusing, really. If I'm travelling out to Papua New Guinea from New Zealand, I go through Brisbane, and it's very difficult to get a connecting flight direct up to where I go to, is Wewak, right in the north of the country. So Brisbane, overnight in Brisbane, and then next day from Brisbane to Port Moresby, overnight Port Moresby, then catch an internal flight from Port Moresby up to Wewak. Now, when I'm coming into Brisbane, you can't just transit. You got to get I've got to go and find a hotel somewhere and stay overnight. Well, of course, that means I've got to go through all the security in Brisbane and all that sort of stuff. As soon as my bags go through the X-ray machines, that gets all pulled out, and they want to have a look. And of course, then they find a box about this by about that, and it's absolutely packed full of medication of this, that. Of course, now they're very interested. What's all this? What's this? What's this? What's this? I do take a list of all the medications from my doctor now and have that signed off, so they can check it all off. But the quickest way to get through all of that is just simply say, guys, I'm off to Papua New Guinea tomorrow morning. It just mysteriously get bundled up, thrown back into my bag, say, see ya. That's the quickest way to, if you ever come across that sort of scenario, that's the quickest way to get through. So just tell them you're off to Papua New Guinea in the morning.
How was it? Sorry, how was it that you got involved with Papua, Rolly?
Well, I was the chief engineer for a large broadcasting corporation here in New Zealand. And it's a Christian broadcasting station here in New Zealand, and then there are affiliate stations all around through the Pacific. And at that stage, we were able to get Christian broadcasting going here in New Zealand, and of course a lot of other countries say, well, how can you do that? It just doesn't fit in with the normal broadcasting. And you'll find the same in Australia. There'll be a commercial license, there is a community license, And then religious broadcasting or Christian broadcasting fits somewhere between the two. It's neither commercial nor is it community.
Yeah.
And we have here in New Zealand, it's called a Schedule 7. And that's where all that fits in. Well, a lot of mission stations around the islands wanted to have Christian broadcasting going, locally, and so they got a hold of us at Radio Rema. It was in those days here in New Zealand. Said, "Well, how do you do that?" We've got a guy we can send up and show you how to do it. So I was nominated for that, and sort of because I was sort of nominated myself in many ways. Because I was a boss after all, so you might as well nominate yourself. And the nice thing about it, really, from an amateur point of view, was that when you get up into these islands, there's an awful lot of time that you do nothing. And you're waiting around doing things, things just don't happen, As we find in New Zealand and Australia, you get a project to do, you're given a time schedule, you do it. And you're expected to meet those time schedules. There's no such thing as that. That just doesn't exist anywhere in the islands, and so it's a fairly long, slow, arduous process, and lots of times with nothing to do. And of course, the other thing you find in the tropics is when the sun goes down, it goes down. There is no long evening. It's just light, dark, right? And so when the dark comes and you're still got plenty of vim and vigor and you want to do something, break out the amateur radio and start playing amateur radio.
Yeah. I think the worst thing I had was, and I won't mention the particular Pacific Island concern, but I was asked to go and do an examination there of an unfortunate person who had died, and I made it very clear that I wanted this individual removed from the freezer in good time for my arrival. Unfortunately, of course, despite all protestations that this had been done when I arrived, it had not been done, and thawing out took several days. So my trip was extended by 2 or 3 or more days simply because of that.
That's very, very typical. And with any trip that I do up to the islands, I say, right, I know this should take me 3 days. I'm away for 7 or 8 or 9 or 10.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's strange, but you can get if you're not careful, you actually fall into that sort of culture yourself.
Yes.
And before you know, oh goodness, I'm leaving tomorrow, and we'd better get this thing done.
Hey, Dave, it was probably better that the guy was in the fridge.
Sorry.
Dave, it'd probably be worse if the guy hadn't been in the fridge, though.
Well, that is certainly true. But fridges and freezers tend to blur in some people's minds when they get to those sorts of areas. And I remember one occasion where I hadn't taken enough instruments with me, and I actually literally had to scavenge in the local hospital to find enough things to use. And that, fortunately, having some contacts on the ground enabled me to get into places to get various bits and pieces. But it can be quite a challenge sometimes.
Do you get to see very many remote places, Dave, that way?
Oh, a few. I mean, I've done a few Pacific things in PNG and a few other places around, and I was involved originally in some of the Middle European stuff in Kosovo and Bosnia and stuff, which had their own quite different aspects to some of the challenges there.
You're talking about war crimes or something similar?
Yeah, that sort of stuff, yeah.
Okay. Now, who haven't we heard from? Nick down the bottom there. Nick, are you actually on a farm at Bannockburn, or what exactly?
Can you hear me, Chris, all right, can you?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Yeah.
No, I'm just in the western side of Bannockburn. But I did grow up on a farm near Penza, south of Hamilton, years ago. But otherwise, just been running around Melbourne for years, and then around Victoria, New South Wales, banging up microwave links. So that's been the story there, Chris. I actually got out today. I hadn't worked an amateur contact on microwave for about 5 years until this afternoon. Peter APW rang up and said, "Do you want to come down to Ocean Grove and try and work Scatter, otherwise known as Gavin 3HY. He's down at Burnie, Tassie at the moment."
Okay.
So we had a crack at 10 gigs or 10368.1, and we heard his beeper and tried to work him on FT8, but it wasn't going to be, and plus we got hit by a big shower of rain. But we worked Andrew 3FS and another station over there at Bass Hill on 10 gigs. So before the weather became unsuitable for those sort of operations.
10 gigs? Fucking size of our antenna would be minute. It's just like high gain antenna making the size of your hand.
I'd guess this is
you
using...
ever get to work ZL1 Italy United on those sort of Sparrowfart sort of frequencies?
Is there a Steve? Is ZL1? Is there a Steve over
He's
there?
right up the very north of the North Island here, and he often works Hayden VK7HH.
Yeah, righto. Yep. I think it's ZL1 PH or no, might have it wrong. But it's been the first time on 10 gigs for a few years. Well, for ham bands anyway. Used to work with Lou ALB and Peter APW and Barry BJM on the field days years ago, up until 5 or 6 years ago, 3 times a year. Especially the winter ones, we were a bit of a test of true character. I'll give you the tip. So up on a hilltop in the middle of winter and the roaring rain and wind and so on. But I'm hoping to go out. Ralph BK3AML rang up the other day and said, "Do you want to come back out to the usual spot out southwest of Ballarat?" Him and Damien KQ and the rest of the characters. So I'll go and do that. And then and plus with ICOM bringing up the new IC905 has sort of sparked my interest again. So so I think I'll and then just spending an hour or two with Pete this afternoon down by the water trying to work Scatter. Might get me back into the microwave game in the ham bands again. So,
have you ever made it through to New Zealand, Nick?
Personally, no. I'm just a junior in regards to microwave and ham bands. So, I used to. I think November 2009. I think it was 3 weeks when things ran really hot. When I worked as a Carl 7HDX down there at Tasmania and Launceston, I think. Worked him on, we're at 10 watts each way. I had a little 13 element Quaggy, he had an 18 element Yagi, and worked each other on SSB, 10 watts, we wound it back. And then went to FM, and even FM at 4 watts each way, we were still working each other, but that's just how it ran back in, November 2009 was the best time we ever had. So, but yeah, I looked at trying to get down to the Hobart Expo and Convention down there, but the ferry is full until late November, so it's out of Geelong now. So
yeah, the ferry has moved from Melbourne to Geelong as of the last 10 days, I think. Doesn't make it so easy for us, but easier for you.
So anyway, I've got an online ticket now for that the conference day on the Saturday, which I think was $22. There's I said you were, I think there, Chris, you probably haven't seen it yet, but I think you got till the 31st of October to get an online ticket. And they've got people, I think, having Paul 5 PAS and a whole host of people putting on presentations for the day, and it'll be live streamed all day, and you'll get a Zoom invite the day before if you
if you join up before the 31st, which must be...
Is the live stream free, or do you have to pay for it? I don't know.
I think it's $22. So,
okay.
So if anyone's sort of been to the all those shows over at Churchill near Morwell years ago, mainly for the microwaves and the VHFs and so on. What was that called? Gibbs Tech. Yeah. So I used to go to those years ago, but haven't been for quite a while. So I used to get pretty rowdy on a Saturday night too. Some of those old blokes, especially a couple of blokes in Camberwell and Kew. Anyway, that's probably enough from me there, Chris.
I think I know who you're talking about, but mum's the word.
Yeah, what happened to the trip?
Yeah.
But anyway, if you're happy with the audio this end, Chris, well, that's good. First time out with this one.
What is the apparatus on the tripod behind you, Nick? We're looking at some sort of apparatus there. Okay.
Camcorder, Canon camcorder there, Chris. Bought that about a year ago. So there's a bit of Sennheiser and Rode gear on it, so I use that for a little bit of stuff at work, which is all just sort of... I take a lot of video work with a GoPro and that, and the drone mainly just for the old man, so he knows what I'm up to, and a little bit socially on a corporate social media, but not for use, but and a bit of fun. So just another money pit hobby, Chris. Much like yourself.
Aren't they all?
Yep.
Yeah.
Motorbox and bloody hell, what else we got? Yeah. Anyway, back to you there, Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Who else haven't we heard from? Dennis up in Canberra. Any news from Canberra? Are you heading for Hobart yourself?
No, I'm heading down to Melbourne in a couple of weeks' time. I've got to go down for work. I'm taking the young bloke with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll probably go stay with some relatives down there, go to Melbourne. I want to do a bit of research at the National Archives. So there's some military history records which sit at the archives in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah.
So the way the archives works is, the Commonwealth Archives works is they won't bring material to Canberra, so you've got to go on site. So got an interest in some aspects of military history. So I'm going to take
Which particular aspects? I'm just curious. I have a few friends who are into military history. They may be able to help. Boer War?
No. I'm interested in interwar military preparations in Australia.
Okay.
So a range of things in the interwar period, because in the interwar period, lots of things happened in Australia was kind of caught a bit short, and they had to ramp up very quickly from 1937. Hopefully not in the same situation we are now.
Well,
but that interwar period is a very interesting period of time, because particularly 37, 38, 39, when they knew something was happening and they had to find a lot of money real quick.
Yeah.
So I've got an interest in that. The young bloke's going down to the work experience down there, so that'll be good. So I'll take him down for that.
Right.
He's 14. He's managed to give himself an army work experience at one of the signal regiments down there, which is really good. So I'll take him down for that and keep him busy. So apart from that, I'm in the town next to Queanbeyan. So yes, whoever's made a disparaging comment about Queanbeyan is probably pretty well on the money. But I still reckon Bawarana does it. I've been to Burke. Bawarana is a step back from Burke, although both towns have metal shutters on every shop. Burke has a pretty functional council. There's a real local feel in Burke, where Bawarana and probably more Wilcannia is, these are towns which have had a lot of Indigenous people in them, and theyve got all the social problems. And it's quite sad, actually. I mean, the government shouldn't be funding any of these places. They should encourage them to move to the nearest bigger town where there's services and opportunity. Yeah. And I remember seeing at the park in Bawarana, looking at these 8-year-old kids, and I looked at these 16-year-old kids, and I thought, that's your future. A very bleak future where it would have been much smarter for the government to say, look, we'll pay you to leave. and go to Dubbo, the nearest big town to Dubbo, Traralgon, even Burke. But get out of these really small places which are essentially dying. The purpose for these towns don't exist anymore.
There are some very nice places too that have that problem. My wife and I used to do a yearly trip to the Brisbane Film Festival. I was working at the time for Griffith University, researching early Queensland films, mostly researching in Melbourne because the State Library of Victoria has excellent newspaper records that haven't survived in Queensland. So I was kind of an extension postgrad researcher. And we'd go up once a year to Brisbane during winter for the Brisbane Film Festival, and my wife would be the driver. I've never driven a car. I've always relied on public transport. My wife is the driver in the family. And we'd get into the car.
That's incredible.
We'd get into the car at 5 a.m. and just drive as far as we could. And on one occasion we drove to Moree. And needless to say, by the time we got to Moree, which has a large Indigenous population, Peru was feeling fairly stuffed. And they have an Olympic-sized swimming pool there that's based on artesian water at something like 30 degrees C. Lovely, relaxing situation. So we got into the pool, and this little kid started talking to my wife, and he seemed very, very friendly, and a couple of his friends came along and they talked too. And this man came up to us and said, "You don't want to be talking to them, they're bungs." And I thought, oh, okay, so obviously there's a different set of values here to where I come from. But my wife apparently was one of the first, in inverted commas, Anglo people to talk to these kids in quite a while. I did notice that on the motel that we went to, there was mesh over the windows to stop rocks being thrown. Just very sad, very sad. Racism is alive and well in Australia. It's just that we don't see it so much in the cities where there's the mixing of cultures more readily. One thing I like about New Zealand is the way New Zealand has become truly multicultural between the Maori and the white man. You look like you've got some reservations, Rolly.
Oh, yeah, it's always a difficult one, but certainly when you get into some of the very rural areas, I suspect similar to what you have over there. Maybe not as bad, but similar.
I think in some areas where I was in Burke and Awarua, I had quite a bit to do with the council there. I was doing some work with a large government agency in New South Wales, and the council had a good, not paternalistic arrangement, but they were quite caring of the local Indigenous people to try and get them some advantage. And their view was we've really got to try and lift them up in terms of employment. And so whatever levers that they had, they used, particularly broke Burke. It was really interesting because you had a whole bunch of guys who are sort of in their 80s on the council, but they really connected in terms of what they needed. And the example is Burke gets about 45 degrees in summer. And what they wanted to do was get the state government to pay for air conditioning for Aboriginal houses. And the argument was, well, these people just got to trash their houses anyway, and not going to look after them and things like that. The view of the council was these places are so miserably hot to sit in. If you cooled them down, they'd be a much more pleasant place to stay, and people would be more encouraged to stay in their own accommodation, and they were quite strong about this. So, well, look, we need the state government to pay for the units themselves, the maintenance, and the power, because power in a place like Burke's very expensive. It's expensive across the country, but it's even more expensive up there. But they were quite sensitive to the local Indigenous people. I was quite a bit surprised. I never saw any of the racism up there. Maybe it was. I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting, that issue about sort of keeping people in sort of housing, make it more pleasant. It goes back, interesting example I saw was when I was in Kosovo, actually, and during, still the troubles were still happening, although it was post the major conflict. And you'd look at these huge sort of, I suppose, really Soviet-built sort of apartments, sort of blocks of flats, as we refer to them, and on every balcony there was a satellite TV antenna with a white satellite. And it looked like someone had just splattered white paint across the side of these places because there were just satellite antennas on every balcony. And they were all provided free, because if they put satellite TV in all of the general housing, what it did is it kept people at home watching TV and not out in the streets. And that was apparently a deliberate policy. Which I thought was absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
It's interesting, the social engineering which is done, and and the thing about the councils in these places, and I presume it's across the whole nation here. I know in New Zealand it is the remote councils. They're the most. They do more than just roads, rates, and rubbish. They do things like childcare services, community building. Yeah, they do Anzac Day, do the local war memorials, do roads, rates and rubbish, of course. They look after the airport, they do the swimming pool, they build a business, make sure there's a functional community of businesses, and also hit up the federal government and the state governments for money and for grants to try and improve. And a lot of these people commit to their communities, like Invercargill. There are people who have a real identity with these places. They've been there for a generation, for a long time, and they have a real identity with the community, and they wouldn't dream of leaving.
Yeah.
We've got 10 minutes left. I should ask Rolly, have you been to Invercargill, and what's your opinion of the place?
I've been to Invercargill many times, and in fact, Invercargill was many years ago when I went down to the Auckland Islands. Invercargill was very much the rendezvous point, and then we headed off down to Bluff and hopped on a boat and off down to the Aucklands. I enjoy Invercargill from several different aspects. I'm not sure if you actually picked up when you're listening to the locals talking there, they have a completely different accent to what I have. Have you picked that up?
Yes, I did notice that ZL4OM, when he was talking about the former mayor, we would call them, he called it a mayor. And I've never come across that before.
Yeah, and all the R's, the further south you get, the more the R becomes a So you come from Gore or Invercargill, and so that
sounds like very much West Country of England, the same sort of thing.
Yeah, you get that rolling of the R, and things like that. You just don't hear that in the North Island at all. But I enjoy much of the South Island, and the further south you go, I think there's a lot of undiscovered, just beautiful country there.
Yeah,
which in general, from a New Zealand perspective, why go any further south than Dunedin? There's nothing there, is there? So,
hey, Rolly, is there a place in New Zealand that you would say like we were considering what we thought was Australia's worst town? Is there any place you would avoid?
Are you prepared to...
I think just about every country, every town, even, or every city has its places which you find other ways of getting there, don't you?
There was only one place in New Zealand I ever felt unwelcome. It's probably the most beautiful place I've seen too, Queenstown. I met very few New Zealand locals there. It was too expensive for them.
Full of tourists.
And that is a common understanding in New Zealand too. I mean, goodness, if I go to Queenstown, I dare not suggest that I come from Auckland.
Oh dear.
But it's absolutely full of tourists. That's the other thing.
So the best thing to do when I'm in Queenstown is that anybody asks where I come from, and just say, we're just touring around the South Island at the moment, and you avoid saying you come from Auckland.
Yeah.
The moment you say you come from Auckland, it's just another friendly Auckland, and you can translate that a little bit better.
Yeah.
Oh, Rolly.
Otherwise known as a Jaffa. So you can put your whatever.
Right.
Yeah, Rolly. While I got the chance, I'd like to say, because I've been watching your videos for the last 2 weeks, thank you so much for them. I'm so grateful that you share your knowledge with us, but you also show a lot of the countryside too, so I appreciate that as well. Anyway, I've been wanting to say that you pick the right people to interview, don't you? There's a lot of stuff that I learn and find out from your videos, so thanks for that.
It was something which I watch a lot of the YouTube channels from the various different guys from around the world and so on, and most of them, I think, take XYZ radio and talk about XYZ radio and things like this, and that's fine. I mean, there's a place for that and so on. But what I couldn't find was anything to do with just the local guys or in a country. You know, what does a local amateur next door do, or what's his interests and things like that. So I thought it could have some wheels. So the first guy I went and interviewed was my friend I mentioned earlier on, Nick from way up north. He's at One Italy United. In fact, I was his lecturer, so to speak, for him to get his license. He was a ardent CBer in the days, and that's when I had the ICOM agency here in Auckland. And he'd often come into my shop and want to buy an ICOM radio, which was the old ICOM 720 in those days. And I refused to sell him one because I knew what he would do. He'd take it home, clip the diode, and he'd be on 27 meg straight away. And so I refused to sell him one. And he said, "Oh, but I want one." I said, "Nick, get yourself a license, and I'll sell you one." I mean, legally we couldn't sell it. In those days, we had to have a written authority from saying that yes, I am a legal. I am a licensed amateur radio operator, so therefore I can legally own an amateur radio license. I said, "You can't sign that paper in all honesty, and I know you can't. Get yourself a license." He said, "Well, how to get a license?" I said, "Tell you what, I'll talk to the local college, community college here, and we'll set up a class. I'll come and teach you guys how to get," because there's a number of them, including my father and my wife, who were also interested in getting an amateur radio license. So I think we had a class of about 30 or 40 people in those days, and they all got their amateur radio licenses. I mean, there's an ulterior motive being the local ICOM agency as well, but and that's how he got his license. And of course, since then his thing is anything above HF. Well, actually, 80 meters is his one of his loves. He has well over 300 countries on 80 meters now, because he's got a big Foursquare Foursquare vertical array up there. But his real love is into the very high frequency stuff, the 1.2 gigs and above. And so that was my first. So I thought, that'd make an interesting video, surely. So I went up and made a couple of videos for that. And all of a sudden people going, "Oh, who else is around?" So that led on from there. Just finding interest. And every amateur that I go and interview, they go, "Oh, you don't want to interview me. What do I do? Nothing." But when you start talking, you start finding, you find the buttons to press, and you find his interest, and everybody else is interested as well.
Yeah, I found that very much well with ZL4OM, for example, who you heard tonight.
Exactly, that's a classic, isn't it?
And I think we're about to run out of time, but anyway. Thank you all for turning up. I haven't had an opportunity to say that for a couple of weeks because I got screwed up on the password to get back into Zoom and had to reset it. Obviously there's going to be some demand for this, and I don't know. I might look into Jitsi, which will give us a bit more time. It might... VK3G has been on at me to make it full duplex on radio, but I really need a cavity resonator for that to make it possible without noise on weaker signals. So for the moment, this with the video is so much better. Why should I worry, really? Any final comments, Nick, VK3BA, before we lose you?
All good. Hang on. All good. Chris, thank you very much. First time on Zoom tonight. Usually on WebEx or Teams or some other strange thing, but
nice to have you there anyway.
No worries, thanks Chris. Top show again tonight. Just better and better every week, so keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you.
There'll be a gap for a couple of weeks now. My wife wants me for a Saturday night thing next week, and with her present conditions steadily improving, far be it from me to say no, it gives me a couple of weeks to prepare something decent on Stewart Island, for example. I've got a lot of video that I shot there, including with a delightfully named Maori guide named Alva Goodwillie. It's a very difficult name to forget. Very nice lady, and she'd lived most of her life on Stewart Island, so very expert in the botany and the bird life particularly. But as you may have gathered, of all the parts of New Zealand, I'm sorry to say this, Rolly, about Auckland, the further south you go in New Zealand, the more I find it interesting. I spent a few nights in Auckland. Oh, there it goes. Damn it. Take it back to the normal. Hang on, I'll go to the normal webcam, which is there, and switch off this light. Oh, we're supposed to have a webcam. Ugh, that looks horrible. I wonder why it looks horrible. Let's just see. Filters, sharpen. It's way too sharp there. Close. Okay, that's better. So we'll go back to, if we can, to 2 metres just to close up. It's nearly 12:30. It's worked very well tonight. And again, thanks to Mike Bailey, ZL4OM, for his contributions. I hope it's the first of many, Mike. It's just a pity that with the 2 hours difference, it's now, what would it be? It's 12:27 a.m. here. It would be 2:27 in Invercargill, and I suspect way too cold to be in a radio shack. Anyway, I'll listen on 2 metres. Do we have any breakers that have persisted this long? VK3AML standing by on 147.475.
Yeah, we say morning. I was tuning all the other frequencies to find out where everybody else was when I came in here, and I'm not sure where they were.
They were all on Zoom, John. Full duplex and video.
Well, I don't know whether I can get that on the Android phone. So your things come up 1 or 2 days after you put them on, not on the same night, which it occurs to me there's a lot of people that have smart TVs and they might try and watch it too, but of course they're all Android too, all the ones I've seen are, so they would have the same problem.
Well, Prue watches on ours. I have to be careful what I say about her.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes, okay. Yes, all quite interesting. Oh, that's what I was going to say. That close down tune you used the other night, I never got to have my final last week. You went on to that, then you weren't listening. I was going to say, could you attach it to an email to me, michaelsign at dodo.com.au.
Hang on, VK3EGG at dodo.com.au. Yeah, can do that, John, but not tonight. It's getting on a bit. I used to be able to do this until 3 or 4 a.m. with Tony back 50 years ago, but that's 50 years ago. Back to you.
Well, I know. Sometimes when I had crossbands with Tony, it used to be... We sometimes had crossbands and the coffee break came on before we finished.
That's 11 a.m. My God. I remember Tony with Matt, both of them long gone now, God bless them, purposely staying up round the clock so that they could officially say that they'd had the 24-hour QSO. That must have been about 1971 or thereabouts.
Yes, and there are a few 24-hour, multi-24-hour 6-metre missions as well. So yes, that was back in those days. Yes, I heard mentions of microwaves. Well, I remember, in fact, I don't know whether we have a tape of it. There was a crossbed where we had you on a light beam going to Mr. Branch, and we had a fellow we called Mr. Microwave. He was linked up with the Larkspur Mallard B70s, which also got stolen with the TV cameras. We had a three-way, quite interesting talk. I think it was in about 1976 or something. And I think I've heard the thing get replayed in the past. I don't think the Stew had a copy of it, and the Branch might have been the only one with a copy of that.
Can't say as I've come across it, but there's Tony kept an exercise book with a list of all the crossbands that he'd recorded, sort of an index, cross-indexed also to all the family videos that he'd shot. One on the back pages of the exercise book, the other on the front pages, and he'd been keeping that since about 1978. I think he bought a huge number of blank open reel tapes in about 1977 or 8, and thereafter all of the old tapes he had he would dub on to 3 3/4 quarter track mono for long-term storage, and there's an awful lot of that. If you add all of that to all of the stuff that Dave has, it's a monstrous amount of material. I mean, even with my Saturday night crossbands, you add each of them up, many of them are 3 hours or more, and they're fully video recorded for the last nearly 2 years. So let's say 50 out of 52 weeks of the year times 3 times 2. That's a lot of hours. I think if I drop off the twig and Prue wants to have a listen to me in future, she has several weeks to choose from. VK3GG, possibly with group VK3AML.
Yes, 3AML, VK3GG, yes, fine, all right, yes, I know. And then somewhere, I don't know what I've done with it, I got a whole lot of CDs of crossbands, so I got off Dave. I hope the CDs haven't gone bad. They've been sitting somewhere in the corner of this room for about 10 years. If I find them, I'll dub them onto a couple of hard drives like I've done with a lot of things, so I've got extra backup. Yes, okay, well, as for sending me an attachment of that closing tune you used last week, you don't have to do it straight away, just sometime in your spare time one day when the thought comes to mind. Yes, though I was trying to get Mr. Branch to give up the smoking, because I took up smoking, not when he did, but for a while, and I gave it up and it was hard enough, and I showed Branch how I did it and he still couldn't do it. But anyway, I guess he had a much worse addiction than I had, and unfortunately, as I remember, Anna kept trying to get him to go and see a doctor about it all, and he never would, and we know what the end result was, which is such a great pity. The last thing I remember was I went to see Mr. Branch about a week before he left the building, and he suddenly looked a lot older for some reason. So I think he was starting to have whatever the problem was that finally took him noticeably about a week or so before there.
I've just put a photo of Mr. Branch. That was the nickname we gave him for those who are uninitiated. The original 3AML that I knew, Tony got the license 3AML in 1967. He operated constantly with it until 1980 from 23 Park Street, Elstonwick, and then afterwards very occasionally on VHF from his various abodes, with Anna Sanderson, the final abode being Newton Street, Surrey Hills. And the photo that I put up there shows him at his final address, Newton Street. Behind him is a 4-channel valve mixer. Up on the shelf is a wideband tuner that he acquired from Rodney VK3AAR and modified, and behind his right ear If people are looking very closely, they can see a reel of 7-inch tape on an Akai machine that's sitting behind him, on which was logged all of this radio stuff that we're talking about. But I know what you mean. The last time I saw him, which is about 5 days before he died, he seemed distracted, unable to concentrate. And after he died, because he died so suddenly, there was an autopsy and they discovered that he had bowel cancer. He would have had to fight bowel cancer if he had lived. And he had advanced arteriosclerosis, which is not surprising when you do a packet of Marlboro a day for, what would it have been, from the age of 16 to 61. 48 years or something. My mental arithmetic was never very good. VK3GG, with a pause for any other breakers. VK3AML.
3BA.
Yes, VK3BA. Take it, Nick.
Not much to say here, Chris. Is it 3GG or AGG I can hear in the background?
3 Echo Golf Golf. He's up on top of the hill south of Upway.
QSL there, Chris. No worries at all. Yeah, got him at about 4x3. So not quite good as yourself, but nonetheless I can receive him okay. So no, that's it, Chris, from me. I think. Yeah, fantastic live stream again tonight. Once again, keep up the good work. Have a good evening, and all the best to Prue. Sounds like she's slowly getting better. So hopefully she keeps improving, and all the best to the pair of you there, Chris. And we'll no doubt listening from you next Saturday night, and hopefully talk to you as well if all the technology works once again. Good work there, Chris. Cheers for now, and everyone else. VK3AML in Burwood, VK3BA in Bannockburn, west of Geelong. Cheers, Chris, and thanks again.
Thank you, Nick, and you're putting in a pretty fearsome signal here about 5 or 8 to 9, so you're doing very well. I wish I was putting out a signal like that. John 3GG, I will have to go. It's 12:37 a.m. Prue will be wondering what's happened to me, and if I spend another 15 minutes, there'll probably be divorce papers served under the shack door. I'll hand it back to you for a quickie. VK3GG, VK3AML, just to tie the ribbons.
Yeah, 3 Echo Golf Golf, VK returning to VK3AML, and VK, was it 3BA, I think it was, in Geelong there. Yes, I'm running just under 100 watts here. I've got an amplifier which I could run 120 watts with if I use the other power supply, but I haven't got anywhere to put the other power supply conveniently. So I've got it switched down to 3/4 power or whatever it is, so it's around about 90 watts. Anyway, I'll let you all go, and I also, I forgot your name in Geelong there, but you're about strength 8 here, up in Upway, just near the historical lookout tower and the TV translator on the hill in Upway. Anyway, it's about 900 feet or so up in the air. Anyway, catch you later on there. VK3GG will be clear and just listening.
Okay, all the best, John. VK3AML now clear.
Yeah, and good night, Chris. 7-3, VK3ACZ.
Oh, cheers, Peter, and cheers, Dave, if you're listening.
Yeah, cheers from VK3CG.
Catch you week after next. I certainly won't be on Saturday, this coming Saturday, but the week after I'll have something fairly special. Hopefully by then I might buy an outboard computer sound card to stop the bloody noise at about... It's not bad, it's just that it's about 35 to 40 dB down, but it's still enough to annoy me. It gets under my skin, annoys me. And when that happens, I feel that a suitable replacement part must be found. VK3AML now clear of 2 metres.
By the way, oh yes, forgot to say, the Sherbrooke Radio Club, I think, is on Monday week, and also I might further investigate the Zoom thing. Anyway, with that, we'll say morning.
Thanks, John. All the best. And I'll fade all that down. You can actually hear how the noise disappears when I get rid of the output of the sound card from the computer. And now the only background noise you'd be getting is from the fan over there that's sucking air through my FT7900. Now, quickly, to thank the people on the text. Nick Ardren, VK3ARD, nice to have you there. Sean 3KK, Sean from Ballarat, g'day. Peter, who else we got there? Terry, oh, I didn't call you in, Terry, my apologies. NPI test, nice to see you there. Rolly, of course, thank you for putting up with us until something like 3 in the morning. And I think that's about it. Good night, John Young and Keza. All the best. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Just a final thank you to all the people in New Zealand who provided access to clips, and of course particularly to ZL4 OM, who apparently is setting up facilities in his house to be able to do his broadcasts through the local community radio station, Southland Radio, or Radio Southland I should say, which people really should look up and listen to. It's amazing how cohesive remote communities like Invercargill can be with the operation of a radio station, and they have some really interesting material broadcast. Material that is not commonly found on other stations, scientific studies of depth, and local music, which has its own interests, particularly for that part of the world. So with that, I'll conclude the stream and wish everybody all the best until, what will it be? It'll be the 14th, I think, of November by that time, and hopefully the weather will have turned better by then. God, we don't need any more rain. We do not need any more rain. I have friends who are suffering from being flooded at Rochester. One whose parents' house has been inundated, and most stuff that was left behind when they evacuated the house lost. Fortunately, they're covered by insurance. I also got some photos which I posted last week from VK3AML, Neil, up at Alexandra, and they've lost a bridge or two over the Goulburn River, so people have to be very careful up there as to which roads they take, particularly with the secondary roads. It's way too late, people. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll catch you 2 weeks' time. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima now, closing stream.